You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealth Builder Movement, an online collective advancing Black and Brown wealth together by joining our Facebook group. The Wealth Builder Movement isn't about money, it's about peace of mind, hope for the future, and fulfilling your God-given purpose. You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealth Builder Movement, an online collective advancing.
Welcome back to the Wealth Builder Movement. We are so happy that you guys have come back for the second evening of this powerful virtual summit on Black and Brown wealth. Yesterday, for those of you that didn't catch up onto it, and for those of you that might want to go back and look at the video, maybe you have missed it, let me give you a quick recap on what we discussed. We really dealt with the wealth mindset. We talked about how you can have great financial wealth in terms of just having wealth, financial wellness. Then we talked about legacy wealth. How do you build things like contracts for a family? We discussed relationships, social capital building. How do you leverage people in your lives and get to know other people so that you can actually advance your wealth further? And tonight, with this firm foundation that we had yesterday on the wealth mindset, now we're going to talk about some actionable things that you can do to build wealth. Listen, there are basically 3 ways to build wealth if you're living in this country. It's either going to be through entrepreneurship, through real estate, or through the stock market. And we're going to touch on each and every one of those things tonight. And I'm super excited for the guests that we have. We have people that have brought out entire blocks. They're going to tell you how you can responsibly invest in your communities and still profit. We have people going to talk to you about how to raise capital for your business, from venture capitalists, from angel investors, even from friends and family. And speaking of friends and family, we have guests who are going to teach you how do you collectively pool your money with friends and actually build and invest together. It's possible, you can do it, and we have all of that lined up. We have a whole series of guests. Some are going to be here with me in the studio live, and other ones are going to be coming in live virtually. We have people coming from as far as Germany with us. So stay tuned for all of this great information. Every segment is going to be fast moving. The other opportunity tonight we have, which we didn't have last night, that I'm excited to let you guys know, is that we are taking questions from you. So if you hear something on a panel, you hear something that somebody said that's exciting to you and you want to know more, shoot us a question. I'm actually going to be answering those questions live here on stage. So please keep them flowing, keep them moving, and we certainly want you to keep us going forward in the movement. Well, our first segment is going to be on how do you build wealth through the stock market. I know a lot of us might be familiar with, or maybe not all of us, but a lot of us are familiar with retirement planning. How do you 401ks, and you kind of get onto a job and they sign you up for a plan, and it kind of seems like money that leaves your paycheck and goes into some account, and maybe you don't know what that is fully. But then there's the whole other side that a lot of us really aren't aware of, which is just investing in individual stocks, setting up your own investments. How do you do that using E-Trade and other metrics and other digital systems? So to launch this, I am super excited today on our cam. You guys can't see them, but I'm going to be looking over here because I love their handsome faces. We have Earn Your Leisure. Hey, so we got Rashad Bilal and Troy Millings with us. So how are you guys doing tonight?
You're doing great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate it.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Rashad and Troy, I'm going to ask you to do 2 things. First, I want you to just introduce yourselves separately because both of you have some pretty dynamic backgrounds. And then I want you to introduce to all of our guests who don't know, although I don't know how you guys could not know about Earn Your Leisure because they're so phenomenal and great. Tell us about Earn Your Leisure and what you guys do on your podcast.
For sure. So once again, thank you for having us. My name is Rashad Bilal. So I'm a financial advisor by trade. That's what I've done for about the last 11 years. And so, I have a financial planning firm and help people out with retirement, investing, savings, things of that nature. And recently, in the last 18 months, we started a podcast called Earn Your Leisure. And now that's really a whole media company and an educational company as well. We talk about financial literacy, and we talk about business and investing, finance, and really cover every area of finance. So that's our platform, and that's really grown tremendously in the last year and a half.
Yeah, and I'm Troy, co-host of Earn Your Leisure, and by trade I'm an educator. I've been working in education for probably over 15 years, and outside of education, I was creating programs and creating curriculum for topics that I knew weren't being covered in traditional school. And so one of the programs we created kind of launched our podcast because we were teaching financial literacy to teenagers in our neighborhood. And we kind of knew that it was something that teenagers needed, but their parents also needed. So that kind of like launched our podcast in a sense.
Awesome, awesome. So I like that you mentioned financial education that it pertains to youth, and I'm gonna circle back to that topic. But before I get there, you guys are coming into me from New York, I know, right? So why don't you tell me about just, we're talking wealth, but we're definitely talking wealth in a different world. So how is it in New York right now with COVID-19, across the world, right? What's going on in terms of us trying to protect Black lives from police brutality and some of the unrest there? You guys want to talk about kind of how that is impacted you guys, impacted your podcast even, or even how that perspective has shaped the wealth movement?
Yeah, New York, as far as the COVID situation, it's actually improving. It was the worst in the world at one point, but we had strict lockdowns that we're just kind of coming off lockdown now. We're just starting to actually be able to move about a little bit. So I guess that's helped because apparently, I guess the numbers have not spiked or have risen at the same numbers of other states that eased the restrictions a little easier. So from that standpoint, it's still a pretty much a ghost town in New York. Not a lot is going on, and as far as everything that's been going on, police brutality, Black Lives Matter, and everything, it definitely has affected our podcast. We actually did a special episode devoted to two topics in relation to what's going on now: police brutality bonds. We talked about social consciously investing. We talked about prison stocks, the business of prison. A lot of different things socially that people are fighting for, but they may not be aware of how it relates to the economics.
Yeah, and I think COVID in itself, as far as our podcast, it's allowed us to refocus and pivot. We were doing a lot of live events, and we've turned that more and more content online. And our business has grown since then because of that. We've been focused on that and just delivering content. Like Shadi said, like when we saw what was happening in the world, it was like we would be remiss if we didn't address it in a way that our audience would expect from us. So police brutality, bronze, like you said, and getting to the root of a lot of the issues, which is a lot of times money, and people don't really understand it. So we try to break it down in a way that is digestible for our audience to get it. And it seems that they are. I feel like as soon as we started talking about it, I see it happening more. People are talking about defund police, which is a topic we had spoke about prior to it becoming like a nationwide thing.
Yeah, and I think so many times people don't realize that the root of a lot of these issues, as you said, is the economic conditions that we're existing in, right? I mean, the saying goes, money is power. And, if you don't have it, then you're not going to be able to access that system of power. Along those same lines, though, I love how you also talked about how you were able to actually leverage or see the crisis that's going on and see the opportunities in it as well, to restructure yourself, to reformat that. Can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of, I know you guys moved to more of a live format, but just in the general context, I know you guys talked to a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of wealth builders in the Black community. Is that a similar trend that you see in a lot of businesses kind of taking this opportunity to step back, reassess what they're doing, and really pivot in some phenomenal ways?
Yeah, I mean, we had started prior to COVID with creating our online school. It's just that the timing of it kind of just worked out. But it's allowed us to connect with our audience in a more direct way. I know a lot of times people hear us on an episode once a week, and it's like they weren't going to hear from us again until the next episode came out. So we've been doing a lot of live content on our own website and having people come on to express their expertise on the website as well. And it's been tremendous. We've grown because of it. But I think like one of the things we always say is like if your business doesn't exist online, then you really don't have a business. And this is a prime example of that, right? Like a lot of people who had brick and mortar businesses or businesses where a line of people coming in and they didn't really focus on the online thing. And now they're trying to catch up to that, but everybody's doing it. So it's going to be tough to separate yourself and distinguish yourself in this type of environment. So we were kind of slightly ahead of the curve. It was a blessing. So, you know, we took advantage of that.
Wow, it's an opportunity there. The lesson there is be prepared for opportunity, sort of say.
Absolutely.
So tell us more about your guys' podcast. When I started listening to it and just kind of watching the videos that you guys do, what I loved about it, it was usually people interview entrepreneurs, they interview real estate investors, you know, they interview people that are, you know, invested in the stock market. And it's usually all just about like their successes and how they've got to where they are. Maybe some, you know, I call them, you know, failures, but it's really like not true failures, something that where they actually look like heroes. But what I love about your guys' podcast is it's very real. You actually break down the steps of how do you do this, but you use the people you're interviewing as case studies and you just let them say it in their own words. How do we do this? And what's the real situation to that? Can you tell me kind of who were some of the favorite people that you know, your favorites in terms of the ones that you've interviewed, were able to learn the most from, or just maybe they were just entertaining the most?
Yeah, I think it's a long list of interviews that I personally have as favorites. I just Wall Street Trapper, who really just broke down the stock market. Alex Good Energy, who really broke down the truck industry. Chris Lorenzo, aka Chris Gotti, who talked about the music industry. So the thing about our podcast that kind of separates it, like you said, a lot of times it's just, you know, it's more of a conversation with the person and just like a biography pretty much of them telling them their journey. But our thing is really different because we actually break down the actual business and get the nuts and bolts. And that kind of came by accident, honestly, because we had a guest named Derek Falcon, who was a great legendary episode for us. And he actually presented and he said his business model, his restaurant, he actually broke it down in extreme detail. And when he did that, that just kind of set the bar. And that was something that nobody had really heard before for people to actually, he was so transparent, the most transparent person I heard. So from there, we realized people really liked it. And we actually was interested in it as well. So now every time a guest comes on, they're kind of prepared to, you know, just give their information. So really it's like a master class and just an informational how-to. A lot of times it just becomes like a how-to, and we break down different industries and people just give detailed information on what they're doing and how.
Yeah, and it gives inspiration. A lot of times we live by that line, like in order to be something, you got to see it. And so like we pride ourselves on bringing out entrepreneurs from all walks of life, so that somebody's looking at it can say like, I can do it. Like you said with Alex, we see trucks all the time here in New York. Like we never thought like that's money driving by us every day. Our perspective changed once we had an entrepreneur explain to us like how that works. So we just try to create inspiration at any cost. And if somebody has a career and they're doing something, let's bring them on, because like it could inspire one person.
Wow, I love that. And that's what I've really enjoyed about watching you guys, listening to you guys, is that breaking down. Yesterday, we talked about social capital with Dana Cosby. And one of the things we said that is kind of can be a barrier, especially in our communities, is that there's this notion that we've been raised maybe our grandparents or our parents, this notion that You don't talk about money, nobody should really be in your business. But to have people come on your podcast and be so transparent about the process, it's saving a lot of people the heartache of having to figure it out on their own, or having to know, what not to do, versus what it is that they should be doing to move their company or their business or their investment portfolio forward.
Yeah, I think that's a failed model as far as, like you said previously, in our culture, it was like, a hidden secret if you reached a certain level of success, or even if you asked your parents like how much money they made. Like a lot of kids don't even know how much money their parents made, and it's like a mystery. And then you get out and then you wonder, you fail financially is because like you wasn't set up to succeed. So you're keeping all this a secret from people, and it's no wonder why we're in the economic shape that we're in. So we look at it like transparency is the great equalizer, and that's the only real way that people can advance, especially our culture that has been left out in the dark for so long on a lot of these topics. Financial literacy, a lot of times it's life and death situation, as far as not knowing certain things can actually hurt you, potentially kill you. So it's information is extremely important, and exposure is extremely important. So I personally feel like, and I feel Troy feels the same way, the more exposure and the more education that we can provide to the people is only going to ultimately help change the entire world.
Yeah, that's kind of like our slogan. The information is going to be on us. The application is going to be on the listener. And, we're starting to see that. Like, we get the feedback a lot, like, yo, this episode changed my life. Or I took some of the things that you said on that episode and I applied it. And like, we kind of been saying that over the past couple of weeks. Is like, everybody keeps saying that knowledge is power. And we're like, yeah, it is, but it has to be applied. And so like, we're trying to change that whole sentence, right? Like, we have to correct ourselves when we say knowledge is power when applied. Because if they're not applying it, we're just hoarding it. And there's no point in hoarding it. We can see the results of hoarding it. It's like the next generation doesn't forward themselves. So we want to make sure that it's applied when we get the information.
Yeah, and it's almost like, we talk about investing money, but knowledge is something that can actually be invested as well. Well, that kind of kicks us into, we are having a live chat stream this evening, and we already have gotten our first live question. The question is, what's the advantage of e-trading versus talking to a financial advisor when it comes to trading stocks? Before you answer that question, can you preface it with, how do you even get into trading stocks? I mean, what are the options for it,
Yeah, you're breaking up a little bit on your audio, but I think we got the general premise. Yeah, I mean, trading stocks is relatively easy now. It's been easy. It's as easy as opening an app on your phone. You can do Robinhood, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade. All of these apps are free to open. Very low cost as far as the trades that you make. Allows you to buy stocks, buy mutual funds, buy index funds, buy ETFs, buy options. You can buy almost anything. Future contracts. So that part is the easy part. The hard part is actually knowing what you're doing, right? So, I mean, there's a variety of different ways how you can educate yourself. We actually have a stock show on YouTube every Monday called Market Mondays, where we go over different stocks and we give education on stocks. But you can read books, obviously, Google. There's tons of different information about how to learn stocks. And as far as the question about the financial advisor versus independent, it just depends on if you feel comfortable doing it yourself. You don't need an advisor to make investments for you if you feel comfortable and you have the knowledge to do it yourself. A lot of times people either don't want to do it themselves or just don't feel comfortable doing it themselves, so they would rather have somebody help them with it. So it's up to you. It's like you cut your own hair if you're a barber, or if you feel comfortable not going to the barbershop. But the vast majority of the people just would rather pay $20, $25 to get their hair cut. So there's really no right or wrong answer to that. You definitely don't need to use a financial advisor for investing purposes, and the financial advisor can do other things besides investing. But specifically for investing, you can do it yourself if you feel comfortable. It's just about having enough knowledge.
Yeah, I think the education piece is important, and that's one of the things we learned. And I prefaced it before when I was saying we were teaching kids, but we also realized that adults didn't know. When we tried to explain stocks, it was like people didn't even know what it was or what they actually meant. And so we use like the pizza analogy every time we start a lesson about stocks, and think of the pie of pizza as a company. So whether it be like every time you want a slice of it, right, that's a share. And so like we tell kids, like, listen, each slice costs this amount of money. And so when we start with that premise, we make it very easy to understand, then that fear moves away. Now it's like, wait, this sounds like layman's terms now. You know what I mean? So like the education part is key to reducing the fear, because I think a lot of people don't get into it because they didn't know, they weren't taught, and there's some fear there.
Wow. So let's talk about that. Can you guys kind of I have no concept of trading in the stock market. You know, I'm not even sure where to start. Like, where is like, you know, where can people start? You know, and then, you know, should we start with something big, and how do they protect themselves risk-wise as well?
Yeah, I mean, I always recommend people start with themselves, right? Like, think about where your money's going every week or every month. People kind of don't agree with that, but I'm like, listen, I pay Verizon every month. Let me see what their stock is. I pay Nike every month. I buy sneakers all the time. I have all Apple products. Let me look at the company, right? So if we start looking at these people, these companies that we're providing income for pretty much every month, and we start looking at them as something that we can own, that changes the perspective. So I mean, I would say start there. And then from there, it's like, all right, now educate yourself and say, all right, well, let's find a symbol first. Most people don't know what that is. Like, you have to find a ticker for the company. And once you do that, then you can go a little bit and say, well, the price that the stock costs, like we said, that slice of pizza, this is how much your pizza costs, right? So in New York, like that could be $5, but all right, that slice of an apple pie, right? That might be $250 today, right? So you want to look at it, break it down, see how much you're willing to invest, and it doesn't take much to do that. And then study companies that you know are going to be here for a long time. There are plenty of companies that we've grown up on that are still here, Apple being one of them, Microsoft being one of them, Facebook obviously being one of them, Amazon. These companies aren't going anywhere. They've been here for 25 plus years and they've shown growth. So these things are around you, and most people know that they're around them. They just don't believe that they can own a piece of the pie.
I think also a lot of times people want to skip the process when it comes to investing, and just like, if you know anything, the first starting place should be education. Like, the stock market isn't going to go anywhere. There's always opportunity to make money in the stock market, but you have to educate yourself first. So a great book to read is How to Make Money in Stocks by William O'Neill. That's like a great starting kit. And, you know, just listening to our podcast, we did 3 episodes on stocks, 15, 44, and episode 70. And then, like I said, we have a weekly show, but a lot of times people they want to skip the education process and just jump right into it. So we can talk about like investing fundamentals and different ways to invest, index funds, mutual funds. Those are all different ways that you can start as a beginner. But I would say, before you do anything, before you put your money in any investment, you want to be fully educated on what you're investing in. So the best way to become fully educated on what you're investing in is to take the time to educate yourself. So those are some resources that you can educate yourself before you actually invest $1. And then by the time you actually start to invest, it's kind of difficult to give somebody advice on investing if they don't know anything about investing. Like, there has to be some level of education already put in place, so you feel comfortable actually opening up an investment account and putting money into an investment.
So in terms of comfort level, what are some things that, if you would say, hey, if you're going to get into the stock market, you would advise somebody, this is probably not the way you want to get. In other words, what are some ways where people can, if they're feeling nervous about it, not jump to the most risky way for them to jump into things? Is there anything cautionary you would say, or just advice you would give on, you know, pitfalls that you've seen people fall into?
Yeah, but trying to get rich overnight, you buy companies that you just look at as an opportunity just to make money in. So like deeply like discounted companies that you might feel is a good opportunity just because the stock is cheap or the stock is low. So a lot of times we call it penny stocks. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times the stock is at a low price for a reason. So, you know, if you're investing in the stock market, you want to invest in strong companies, solid companies, right? So it doesn't take a genius to, Apple's stock will probably go up in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, right? So that's something that, you know, that's a solid investment. Apple, Microsoft, Google, tech companies, right? The economy is driven by tech. Whereas if you look at other companies that, you know, off-brand company that you never heard of before, it's probably not a good idea to invest in that company. So a lot of stuff with the stock market really, honestly, is common sense, especially the easy plays. But I think a mistake that people can make in the stock market is just trying to get rich quick and investing in companies that they don't believe in, that they haven't researched. They just, might have heard about it and they just think it's an opportunity to make money. Never invest in a company that you don't believe in.
Yeah, I think people live in that fear of missing out, so they tend to buy high and sell low, right? So they see a company is going up and it's hitting this all-time high, and they're like, "Well, let's buy that now." And then in the stock market, you want to do probably the opposite, right? You want to buy low and then sell high so you can make a profit. So a lot of times you see that, and that's just a common mistake that people made. We're not excluded from that. We've made that mistake plenty of times, but when you learn from it, and that's why I think it's important, like we give those resources, like we said, if you listen to the episodes we put out, we're giving you the mistakes, so hopefully you don't have to go through them. And that's the real like education, right? Passing it on to the next generation. Don't do that. We did. I'm telling you, these are the results.
So real briefly, I know we're almost out of time. I did want to cover it because there was a lot of people I saw, a lot of my friends, myself as well, was looking at what was happening during this COVID-19 pandemic and thinking, now is the time to jump in, and wondering, well, where do I jump in? What do I buy? How do I move forward? What kind of, advice would you give for people that are, has a train already left the station? Are they pretty much, is that a thing of the past, or are there still opportunities to get in?
Yeah, no, it's never a train that has left the station on the stock market. There's always opportunities to get in, but I think it's important to keep a long-term horizon. So, like if you invest in an index fund, an index is a collective of pretty much like all the different stocks inside of the market. So how the market is gauged is usually by indexes. So they have like the S&P 500, which stands for Standard & Poor's 500. So that's 500 companies from a variety of different sectors that actually make up the market. So usually if they say the market is up or the market is down, they gauge in that by the S&P 500 or the Dow Jones. Dow Jones, I think, is like 36 companies. So you can invest in that. Like you can invest in the 500 companies that the S&P makes up. And that's an easy way to invest for people that, just want to get into the market, because now you're not actually picking and choosing a stock. You're picking 500 stocks, and it's diversified because all your money is spread out across the board, and it moves as the market moves. So you're not going to like double your money overnight, but as the market moves up, because the market always moves up over the course of time, your investments will move up as well. But yeah, it's never an opportunity, just like real estate. Like there's better times to buy real estate than other times, but people always buy homes no matter what. Mm-hmm. So it's the same thing with the stock market. A few months ago would have been a great time to get into the stock market, but that has passed. Possibly we might revisit that. The market is down a lot today, the last couple of days, so it might go back into that direction. We don't know. But even if it doesn't, I think it's a good opportunities to invest in strong companies over the course of time. You'll still make money.
Yeah, I think if anything, if we learned anything from this COVID experience, is that technology is always going to win out, especially in this environment where everything's been closed. Technology stocks have done great, whether it was Amazon, whether it was Google, whether it was the platform that we're on right now, Zoom. So pay attention to the technology stocks. Do your research on them, and eventually, Apple too. I can't forget Apple. Obviously, is a technology stock, and Tesla as well. These stocks, even in the recession or in this pandemic, have done pretty well.
Cool, awesome. Well, we're out of time. Thank you guys so much again. Earn Your Leisure. You can find them on Spotify, I believe. You can find them on YouTube. You can find them on Facebook, I do believe, as well. And we are so happy to have you guys. And we definitely want to continue on further. You launched us into what is going to be our next segment, which is real estate investment. And just like the stock market, there's really no bad time to get into it. So we'll be right back for that segment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Collins, and I'm the CEO of Anywhere Faith. When asked about wealth building, especially as a millennial, as a young girl from Chicago, I would be lying if I told you I knew in any way, shape, or form what I was talking about. As a person who has started a business before, did not completely see it through, as a CEO right now, my main focus and my main priority was understanding and learning how to do what I do well, correctly, efficiently, and effectively. And as a young African American woman, nothing matters more than building wealth, creating generational wealth for my family, for my children, for my future, and funding my legacy. So, this conference has been amazing, if for no other reason than the fact that we have access to amazing speakers, an amazing community, and for people like me who are here because we want to learn, our testimonial is simple. We have access to the juice. And I appreciate that so much about the Wealth Builder movement, about this virtual summit, because just like Dana Cosby said yesterday, our social capital spins just like our financial capital. So stuff like this is amazing. We are learning everything. This conference is taking us through step-by-step bits and pieces of things that we can use to grow our wealth, to create streams of income, to create funding within our community, and eventually handle our business and build Black and brown wealth, which is why we're here. So this has been amazing. This has been absolutely phenomenal. I can tell you that I have completely learned how to access the information. We may not be able to do everything our own yet, but we've learned how to access the information, and I am so grateful. Thank you so much to the Wealth Builder movement, and I cannot wait to see what the rest of this night has in store.
Welcome back to Wealth Builders Movement. We are so excited. We are going to have now a great conversation about real estate investment. We have some excellent guests that are here in person with us, but we also have some virtual guests that are coming in from locally as well as far down as Texas. So here with us, we have Amador De La Torre. He is a real estate broker, an investment advisor. We also have Wendy Cosby, who's coming from the banking sector, Republic Bank and Trust. And so on the live stream, we have with us Louis Legier, who is coming into us from Louisville, but is a real estate investor, doing a lot of short-term rentals. And then we have Chris Senegal. And Chris Senegal is actually a real estate developer and has done some really amazing things around neighborhood revitalization and really addressing gentrification. So I'm going to start actually with Amador. And I'm going to ask you this question, Amador. A lot of times people think of real estate agents and realtors and they just think, if I'm looking to buy a home, that's what I need. But do people miss out on the opportunity when we're thinking about an investment property and thinking about beyond just their personal home? Like, where does a realtor come into play when you're trying to do maybe a commercial property or do investment in other properties you don't live in?
Oh, absolutely. You know, especially when you go into investment property, there's so many different components that make up the deal. And if you're not versed in them, you can really be led astray. So even more so with commercial, you would definitely need that advice and guidance.
And so the other add-on to that is, so I know I had been looking at a commercial property, and there were things I just didn't really realize that I was missing out on doing it on my own. I was actually the one that people was like, I don't need anybody. We know how to technology now. We can just do it. We'll just look up properties. And we got contacted by a great agent in town. And she just knew so much about the property. She knew about properties that were coming on beforehand. And we actually ended up getting a property because somebody had told her personally, like, hey, we're going to put it up, but they hadn't actually put it up. So we kind of got on the inside track and were able to get an excellent property. Does that happen frequently where, in your community, there's almost this underground network and, it's just like, hey, this is coming up. It's not on, yet, but, you might want to look down the pipeline for it.
Sure. I want to say it so much an underground network, but it's just, a well-versed agent has access to information, and they're also going out and talking to developers or talking to bankers, and so they have a pretty good idea, a finger on the pulse of the economy, the Louisville market. So they have an idea of what areas are up and coming, or what areas they're investing money in. So definitely you can leverage off of that and really position yourself up for success. Wow. So yes.
And I know when you and I were talking offline, we were talking about, sometimes you're looking at a property and the agent may actually know something about the structure or be able to give you advice. And like, you might want to get this checked out, just as a general rule that we don't often think about.
Right, right. Agents, not inspectors, but we've been around enough properties so we can walk around and kind of get an assessment overall of things that might be a red flag. If you look at cracks in the foundation, for example, are they vertical or are they horizontal cracks? Should there be an issue? Are they about with a downspout? And maybe there's a water issue happening there. So the things that, for me, I really want my client to focus on and see, can I see myself being in this space? Is this right for my client, for my staff? Is this right for me? I want to go around and look at all the other stuff that they may be overlooking. I don't want them to worry about the details and the mechanicals and things that might come up later. And so we kind of have a list running in the background of things that we want to use to negotiate on your behalf to really provide a better deal for you. So.
Oh, wow, wonderful. So even if you have a realtor, you still have to do a lot of effort on your own, a lot of education on your own if you're trying to launch into real estate investment. So that brings me to you, Louis. Can you give us a little bit of your background, your story on what it is that you have been doing in terms of how did you get into real estate investment? And then tell us, how was that? Like, was it nerve-wracking to kind of launch into something that was new? So we'll come back. I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties there. So Wendy, I'm going to kick it to you because I know that you work with Republic Bank and Trust, and oftentimes we have a lot of individuals that are trying to get a loan, even as an investor. Can you talk about some of the differences between getting just a standard mortgage for a homeowner versus getting a loan or trying to acquire funding for an investment property or even for a commercial property?
Sure. So when we think about getting lending approved on the commercial side, it's a little bit more involved, but at the same time, it's less involved. On the residential side, I almost feel like you have to give a urine sample, blood, and
everything
just to get approved.
Firstborn son.
That's asked of. But on the commercial side, although things are looked at closer, there's not as much documentation that is required. But when you are looking to get approval for any type of commercial lending, you want to be able to sell that, hey, I do have liquidity. Liquidity can be cash in, checking account, savings account, an investment engine that you can liquidate in 3 to 5 days. You want to be able to show that you can inject that equity up front. And you also want to be able to show that after that injection, you still have leftover cash to, address an HVAC issue or address, a water heater going out, because, we still have an interest as a lender in that property. So, that's what I'll say.
What are the most common mistakes people make when they come to a bank and they're looking to get, a loan? What are just some just simple things that you find people usually always kind of become stumbling blocks, but they really didn't have to be?
Yes. I kind of think about my 3 C's, the first one being cash that I just mentioned before. You have individuals who think that, on the residential side, generally it's anywhere from 3.5% to 5% that you need to put down, whereas on the commercial side, we're starting in today's environment at 20% down or greater. So, that is something that a lot of individuals I've seen don't prepare for. And then, like I mentioned before, that leftover cash. The second C that I have is the whole credit piece. I know that, on the residential side, a lot of times you can just take care of some charged off accounts by paying those off. They'll still sit there for 7 years, but you can still get approved for that mortgage because most people need, a residence to live in, and they're going to take care of their residence first. Whereas on the commercial side, we're going to look at, every piece of your credit. We're going to look to make sure everything's paid as agreed, and if there's any blemishes, we're going to question, well, why was there a slow pay on that credit card? Or, why was that account charged off? And, depending on the age of that charge off, sometimes that can prohibit a person from getting approved. My last C is around cash flow. Cash flow is so important because you want to be able to show that you can manage your finances. And when you're able to show that, I have majority cash coming in and a little going out, that's huge. And when you can show that you can make your monthly liability payments, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 times in 1 month, that's very strong from a borrowing standpoint.
Oh, wow. Now, Amador, I know that you probably are also an investor as well as kind of an agent side. Do you play in that side of the park, or?
Yeah, I do actually.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, we're looking at cap rates and what kind of cash flow the properties will bring us. And what Wendy said too about having reserves is very, very important, because I don't want to set up my clients, I want to set them up for success. I don't want to set them up for failure. So even though I'm not a finance person, having that relationship with the banker is really important, even a financial advisor, so they can go through and make sure that they're going to be able to weather the storm through a recession or a pandemic. So having, you said earlier that generational wealth is through real estate. I believe that's very, very true. But acquiring real estate is one thing, but being able to keep it throughout the generations and having a legacy is even more important. Wow. So we want to make sure that they have all their finances squared away in that regard.
Do you see that a lot, kind of people getting older, their parents passing away, and then the property being kind of left out of the family, or just kind of going up for, some cases, maybe even foreclosure over things like taxes? Have you seen that a lot?
It doesn't happen a lot, but we want to prevent that from happening. So I think that financial literacy component is very, very important. Whenever a family member does inherit that piece of property, we want to make sure that they know what they're doing with it and be able to, it's a bit, essentially you're buying a business and providing the cash flow, and we don't want them to lose that.
Oh, wow, that's amazing. So another question I had, and I'm going to kick this back to you, Wendy. Let's say I get denied. Let's say I didn't have everything together. What are some things that people can do if they get to, is that a cause to just be like, well, I just need to wait a few years and try again later? Or are there some avenues? Does that relationship with the banker come into play there?
Yes, it does come into play. I think it's very important, no matter which financial institution you go through, to connect with an officer, ask questions during the process, and if things don't turn out the way you plan for it to turn out when we think about a decision, it's good to ask those questions. Why did I get turned down? What can I do to turn this around so that I can get approval in 6, 12, 18 months? A lot of times it's easy fixes, and as long as you're educated on how to get that corrected, a lot of times we can get it done. I do a lot of education with my clients prior to getting or even submitting an application. And a lot of times they're ready to go when it's time to move forward.
Oh, wow. So we have Chris Senegal, who I believe is calling in on the phone with us tonight. And I'm so excited about Chris, because Chris just is like, just this young, young black man has just seemed to not only have gotten into the investment game and doing great things there, but doing it in such a, not even, responsible is even the word, in a way that's just empowering the whole community and kicking it up a notch. So Chris, can you tell us a little bit about your story, a little bit how you got into investment, and what you're doing with your properties? Can you hear us, Chris?
Okay, I can hear you now. Yeah, for some reason I couldn't hear, the sound was out earlier. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Would you like me to ask the question again? That's technology. Oh, he's a little muted. Well, we'll come back to Chris when we get him back in. Hopefully we'll get him in, because I really want to hear Chris's story, have you guys hear his story and what he's doing down in Houston.
So I can hear you. Yeah. So I can hear you now. The audio wasn't working just now for some reason, but I can hear you.
Okay, wonderful. So Chris, can you give us your background? How did you get into investment? And tell us some of the powerful, amazing things that you're doing in Houston in the 5th Ward.
All right, so Christopher Senegal. I'm born in Lake Charles, Louisiana. I grew up in Port Arthur, Texas. Went to Southern University, HBCU in Baton Rouge for civil engineering. Went on a full academic scholarship, graduated, got that good corporate job, and realized I hated it the first year. So for me, it was just, I didn't like engineering, I didn't like corporate America, so I decided I was gonna try to figure out an early exit strategy. And for me, I just started reading books, and real estate just kept coming up. So started flipping houses like 2008 when I was about 24, and did that until 2013 when I decided to try to focus on bigger projects and things that had bigger impacts on the community, because flipping houses or having just a rental portfolio is cool, but it's kind of like a personal wealth building initiative. It's not really anything that's really going to impact the community in a significant way. So for me, I wanted to focus on trying to change the narrative on the gentrification that usually happens in our neighborhoods. Sometimes even as investors, we participate in it by raising rents really high, by flipping houses and making them unaffordable for the rest of the community. So for me, I was trying to figure out a way to still be able to revitalize, bring nicer things back to the neighborhoods, even build new construction and bring higher incomes back to the neighborhood without displacing anybody that's already there. So from 2013 until now, that's been my focus. The first few years were me just kind of bumping my head, trying to figure it out, getting the right team in place. Finally, by about 2017, I was able to take my first block of property that I had acquired in 2013 and start doing demolition on and bringing in new construction. So the new construction was on a site that was abandoned, drug infested, prostitution infested, high crime. So removing that blight from the neighborhood and then bringing new construction into the neighborhood, displacing any existing residents. And the focus was bringing young Black working professionals back to the community. So that project has been going very well. I've completed 5 of the houses, and so far all of them have my target buyer, the young Black working professional. I have a couple of them pre-sold that I haven't started yet, but it'll be a total of 14 on that site. And the area is going through a lot of gentrification. There's a huge 150-acre mixed-use development coming to the neighborhood. So when I talk about buying a home, and you hear this narrative that you should always buy a home, and a home is always an investment. That's always debated. Well, the reality is an investment has to be something that gives you a greater return than what it cost you. So if you look at all of your expenses for the year on a house, including insurance, taxes, maintenance, upkeep, repairs, and you add all that stuff up, and then you look at the value of your house, if it has increased more than that in that year's time, then yeah, that's really an investment. Otherwise, it's not. It may be a safe vehicle for you to park your money, but you're not really making any money. It's not profitable for you. So there's nothing wrong whether you want to rent or you want to own. So if you lose your job when you're renting, you don't have a foreclosure on your record. Whereas if you own the house and you lose your job, you have a foreclosure on your record. So there's a lot of pluses and minuses to that. The way you cheat that, though, is you buy in gentrifying areas, because when you buy in a gentrifying area, the value goes up so significantly that you're going to have a lot of equity in that home. That really makes your primary residence an investment. So for me, I had to make sure that I educated our people on that and make sure that they understand that it's important to buy homes in the right areas, and it's even more important to buy in areas that are going to be gentrified anyway, because then we kind of control the narrative. We move into the neighborhoods. We kind of control what happens to the existing residents. We have more say-so in that process. The second part of what I do now is buying existing rental portfolios that are occupied by long-term tenants, because they're in the same gentrifying areas, and other investors that will buy these properties will not be focused on making sure the tenants stay there. They're going to be focused on buying them, renovating them, increasing the rents as much as possible, and maximizing their return. Well, when it comes to real estate investing, you make money in 2 ways. One is the value appreciation of the actual real estate, of the asset. The other is the cash flow. So we're taught to focus on the cash flow so much that we neglect the fact that we are really displacing the community and accelerating gentrification oftentimes. But if the other side of that investment, meaning the value appreciation, is significant enough, you don't have to really increase the rents. You can let the rents stay where they are, as long as you're buying it at the right price. You have a nice return on your money, your cash return, the deposit you put down to buy the property versus the profits from the rents every month. If that's still positive, that's good. And you're still going to get a tremendous return on investment by the appreciating value of the asset. So for me, taking that model and basically creating it, because I hadn't really seen anybody do it, and going to sellers that would allow me to give them a down payment and make payments to them, aka owner financing, without using a bank. So that allows you to have a lot more leverage. You're not worried about the bank waiting to tell you qualify. You're not worried about your credit score. As long as you have the money, or you can find people that have money to invest with you, then you can control entire blocks of the neighborhood. And that's literally what I'm doing. And with this project, with this portfolio of 18 houses, and actually 2 commercial buildings too, I was able to do a crowdfund. So I'm allowing anybody and everybody that has at least $250 sitting around somewhere, you can invest and you can actually own a piece of this real estate. So we don't have to wait for Oprah. We don't have to wait for LeBron anymore. We can go in and save our own neighborhoods, especially the ones being gentrified, that we're going to lose anyway. We need to go and protect them. You know, you spend $250 on a Nike stock and get a 1% dividend, then you can invest in this and quadruple that and have value appreciation because you know you're in a neighborhood that values are going up anyway.
Wow,
So
I like
it's kind of
that.
hard to. I know we got 30 minutes. So I'm trying to compress it down really quick.
Well, I'm going to have you on for a whole second hour, Chris, because I really want to hear more about that. I mean, I like what you said. We don't have to wait for Oprah Winfrey and LeBron James to come in, because sometimes we, in our communities, you know, we always have these hero figures that are lifted up, and it makes people feel like, well, I'm not wealthy because I don't have Oprah money. But you're saying, hey, collectively, you are wealthy. And even individually, reevaluate your definition of wealth. You don't have to be a billionaire to be wealthy. There's other ways. Louis Legier, I believe you are on the line with us as well. And I'm excited to have you because you do a lot of, I believe, investment in short-term rentals, and you have your own really fascinating background because you're not only a real estate investor, you're also a contractor. And that kind of gives you a little bit of a benefit in terms of knowing what properties are going to be coming up and going to be valuable. So Louis, are you with us? Can you hear us now?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful.
So yeah, as you mentioned, I started my career in home improvement, been there for about 16 years. And roughly about 4 or 5 years ago, I got deeply into real estate investment. I strongly agree with Chris about, you know, doing things for our community. I did get involved with the long-term rentals and the flipping market, the buy and holds, and then also recently the short-term. That's all to build capital. I mean, obviously, you got to have the money to, you know, reinvest back in your community, and it helps, right? And he's correct. We don't have to wait on the LeBron. We don't have to wait on the Oprah. You know, we also don't have to have rich parents either, right? We can find ways to think outside of the box and make things happen. And I've been fortunate enough to, you know, I'm a big networker. You know, I'll meet anybody and everybody because you never know, you know, who you're meeting and what could happen, even if it's not now, it could be in the future. So I am fortunate to have my home improvement business, but you don't need a home improvement business to be able to remodel properties or to take care of your own rentals or get involved with an investment group.
And so you talked about that, maybe you don't have rich parents. Louis, can you tell us a little bit about, because you have a fascinating, even just background story, you know, about how you ended up coming to America and then just how you've just leveraged the opportunity and the experience, but also experiencing it not maybe as an African-American born here, but certainly coming in the immigrant experience. Can you talk about that? Because I think that's really interesting, and there's a lot of people that would resonate with that background, with that story, and that find themselves in that same place.
Yes, I'm originally born and raised in Haiti, and when I was 7 years old, myself and my family, we built a boat and took off and didn't know where we were going. So fortunately, when we took off in that venture, we started taking on water. So the Coast Guard ended up picking us up. But what's fascinating about that story is the Coast Guard was not supposed to be there. Their mission got changed last minute, and that in the accepted us. We were already saying our goodbyes and, you know, preparing for the worst. So when they picked us up and spent a year and a half in the detention camp, Guantanamo Bay, and eventually we got sponsored by a church in Indianapolis, North United Church. They helped us learn English, get in school, you know, helped us get on our feet, right? So I've literally, sometimes there's, you know, hardship can bring some. So I've learned based on what I've been through throughout my life that there's not much that I can't accomplish if I just go after it. You know, it might not come as fast as I want sometimes, but you know, things like that, I feel like I'm blessed to be here. I mean, I don't know why I'm here, but I'm glad I'm here. But yeah, that's how I got to America, and I'm now a U.S. citizen, and you know, it's the best place to be where you get the opportunity to create something from the ground up. And you know, just like individuals like Chris and people you had on earlier, Wendy, and yesterday. And I'm happy to see, you know, this movement and what's happening here, and then us coming together to talk about it.
Would you say, Louis, that your upbringing, your background, the trials you've been through, the resilience, but I think it's everybody has a different telling of it, right? But I think so much in the Black and brown community, I could pick out almost everybody kind of has that resilient story, regardless of what it's based off of. Do you think that resilience maybe makes you, it helps you in the times when investing gets hard?
I absolutely think that, and again, everybody's capable, but specifically in the Black and brown community, we've been through some hardship and we survived, right? And a lot of the communities, we're some of the best bankers around. We could make a dollar last a long time, right? So the only thing that we need to do is, have the confidence to start something, right? I mean, fear stops you from, investing in real estate or starting a business. You say, well, I can't do it. I've never done it. And at some point, you're just going to have to believe in yourself, because you got to believe in yourself first before you expect other people to believe in you.
Well, that's amazing. I like that fear stops us from getting into so much. I know, even for myself, entrepreneurship, was a situation where I was like, a little bit risky to get into it. But real estate, there's just something about it that seems risky, but it really isn't. Amador, could you talk to us about, why does it feel like real estate just always seems like this scary thing if it's not a home that I'm living in?
Sure, it's, it's big, and it's outside of most people's comfort zone, and it's absolute. You're making a commitment, it's a 30-year commitment in some cases. So, and you hear about the horror stories, but there's so many successful stories out there, people leveraging real estate for their benefit. Even the cost of acquiring a property and paying the mortgage, if that is scary, there's certain ways to minimize that cost. Cash flow is a big component of that when you're talking about your financial needs. So there's absolutely no reason how you can minimize your risk by buying a house, for example, that has a rental component to it. So now, half of your mortgage can potentially be paid off. So now you're looking at your real estate, your home, as an investment, as a income-producing asset. And then in regards to financing, you can use up to about 70, 80% of that income that's coming in. And if you feel more adventurous, you can even get up to a duplex, a triplex, or even a fourplex, but not a fiveplex when you're first getting started, because that's now considered a commercial loan, right?
It can be, depending on how it's titled.
So when do you want to, I like this dialogue here, because so when you tell us about that, what are the differences? It sounds like with different properties, there's different loans and different ways that, one might be riskier, another, not risky, but just something to give people more comfort to say, how do I get my cash flow up? So we talk about from the bank perspective, about those financing options.
Yeah, there are some financing options that are traditional and then non-traditional. One of the most popular products is just the commercial real estate loan. And generally what you'll see with those types of products are fixed rates, and one of the most popular is probably 5 years or 7 years. And that's only because, the lender wants to revisit that borrower again, just to make sure business is flowing in the way it should be flowing. But the commercial real estate loan is most popular, but I also have clients who will take advantage of lines of credit. Lines of credit, a lot of times those come, especially large ones, will come out of real estate that they currently own. So primary residence or other investment properties, we can create lines of credit so that you can use those funds to purchase additional properties, whether that be at the auction or, privately, or, use as down payment or use to help flip a property. They can be used for multiple purposes. So I would say those two are the most popular.
Wow. So we are almost out of time, but I want to give, if we still have Louis and Chris on the line. Chris first, I just want to give you an opportunity, maybe really quick, 60 seconds. What's your biggest piece of advice to somebody who has never invested in real estate before? And 60 seconds or less, can you give that to us, if you can hear us?
Yeah, sure. The most important thing I would tell you to do is find someone in your local network that understands your local market, that can help you and guide you. Do not try to figure it out on your own. This is school. You don't have to take a test and pass on your own. You want to cheat. You want to copy off of somebody that's doing it correctly. You need a realtor on your team that understands investors. Do not just get a realtor that helps people buy houses. They don't understand how investors think. They don't understand what investors really looking for, and they don't have the network to help you once you close on the house. If you're going to use a realtor that does have that experience, they'll probably have other investors that have contractors and everything you need on the team already to help you. Property managers, all that kind of stuff. So shortcut your way to success and leverage expertise, knowledge, and experiences of other people.
Awesome, thank you. Louis, 30 seconds or less. One piece of advice for us.
Well, the number one thing I would say is just get started, right? There's no perfect time. I mean, as Chris said, get involved with the right group and just get started. I mean, there's only so much reading, so much YouTube, so much, information you can get. You gotta jump over the cliff and believe that you can learn something new.
Wow. Wendy, if I want to get a loan from the bank, I want to get financed, I want to build a relationship. One piece of advice.
I always say, connect with others who are investors and see who they have good relationships with, and just visit that officer and, learn that culture, learn what it is that it takes to get qualified for lending.
Amador, your last stop. How do I know I'm with a good agent? What else should I be looking for? One piece of advice.
Definitely go out there, interview agents, ask them why should I work with you. And if they're not coming back with you saying that they're like a full-time agent, they know how to make things happen, how to find buyers, how to find sellers, have contractors that they have access to. You may want to look elsewhere, but you really want to have someone that's well-rounded, well-versed, and well-experienced.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad you guys could all join us today, both here and virtually. Our next segment is coming up. Please stay tuned. Also, we have opportunities again for questions during the segment. So next segment, please send those questions in. We're looking forward to you guys joining us virtually. We'll be gone for just a short moment, but please stay in your seat and continue to watch this. Also, please, we'd like to thank our sponsors, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, Nimbus Inc., National Black MBA Association, as well as the Community Foundation of Louisville. If you would like to be a sponsor, we are going to drop the link into the chat stream. This is a powerful program, but it does cost us money, as well as it's just a wonderful opportunity just to put your company out there and for people to understand that, hey, you do care about Black and brown wealth. So we are looking forward to having you guys join us back on the next segment, which we will be starting very shortly. Builder movement isn't about money, it's about peace of mind, hope for the future, and fulfilling your God-given purpose. You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealth Builder Movement, an online collective advancing Black and brown wealth together. If you would like to be a sponsor, if you would like to donate to the cause of building wealth, again, you can find that link in the chat stream. I mean, what we're trying to do is basically bring not only the narratives of Black and brown investors, founders, movers in the wealth building community, but also share the training and advice that they can provide. So often we are disconnected from each other. We don't have a platform to just be vulnerable, be honest, and give that advice. And so please, if you feel that you have been moved by this broadcast. If you would like to see more of this, emphasis on if you would like to see more of this, we're talking about wealth, so we know it takes money to put on a production like this. So if you would like to see more, please let us know. And please enjoy, again, another flash of our sponsors, and we'll see you at the next segment. Welcome back, everybody. We just had a wonderful segment talking about real estate investment. We heard from real estate agents. We heard from young investors that are doing developments down in areas that are quickly being gentrified. So we heard about the power of revitalization versus gentrification. We heard from wonderful real estate investors that are, kind of launched into it from coming from almost like very humble beginnings and saying, hey, you don't need to be super rich to get into it. All you need to do is pick up a book, pick up a phone, call a friend, get to make a new friend to learn what's going on. And we also heard from banks, right? A representative from a bank, Wednesday Cosby, who talked about how you can build that relationship with your banks to do financing of this. Well, the real estate segment was a really great segue into what we're going to talk about now. So maybe hey, I just got a few coins, all right? I got a little bit of residual income, and I want to leverage that. I don't want to wait until I have accumulated, tens and tens of thousands of dollars to invest. So now we're going to talk about how you can invest. And we call this, funds with friends, right? So how can you start your own investment club or join an investment club where you, not being an accredited investor, can also still invest? I'm excited because we have Butch Mosby, who's joining us all the way from Germany for this segment. He's not only a real estate investor, but has worked out a really great way to allow other people to invest in properties. And so we're going to hear a little bit about his background, as well as the trade-offs between being an accredited investor and going it solo versus kind of leveraging other people. So Butch, can you hear me? Are you on the line with us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, man. Crystal clear. All right. So Butch, my first question for you is, can you tell us a little bit about your background? You kind of have a really interesting background that has brought you all the way to Germany, but very briefly, can you tell us kind of your wealth background, your entrepreneurial background, and then kind of launching into how you got into the investment side of it?
Sure. I'll try to give you the Cliff Notes version. I grew up in the West End. I was a football player, male high scholarship, played for Murray State University. I got a contract to play in the German football league. So I thought I would make millions of dollars playing football in Europe, but I didn't make millions of dollars, so I had to go back to America and get into corporate America. And so I started working in the online travel space for Hotels.com. And that was the first opportunity I had to get stock options, which are some awards that they would give employees. And so if you help the company grow, and when they sell, then you would get a piece of the business. So I worked for Hotels.com, and we sold that company for $1.4 billion to Expedia, and then I went on to work for Expedia. And then I went, I jumped ship from Expedia and went to work for another startup company called GetAroom.com in the same space, which was competitors to Hotels.com. And the whole goal was, of course, to build that company and sell it. And so it took 10 years, but we started in 2009, and we ended up selling that company in 2018 majority for several $100 million. And I took my small little piece of that because I had a stock option package again. And then I started to invest that into the West End and also build sponsors for success with that.
Butch, can you tell us, you were mentioning the West End. We have guests from all over the nation, maybe even some outside of the U.S. that are here. Can you tell us a little bit about the demographics of the West End of Louisville, Kentucky, that I believe you're referring to, and why you chose the West End to invest in?
Well, yeah, so I grew up in the West End, and I love my people. I love the neighborhood. I love the culture. I had a very rich experience growing up. It's hard to look at the West End today from the deterioration and how the abandoned properties are there and the vacant lots. And so I decided that I wanted to invest in the West End and kind of give back in a way, and try to be a part of the revitalization of the West End.
Mm-hmm. And
in regards to the demographics, I don't know exactly the statistics, but majority of it is Black, probably 85%, somewhere around there is the demographic.
Mm. And now I know when you started out, we had a conversation, you were talking about kind of this, solo, show, accredited investor, or even a accredited investor that works with other accredited investors. And then there was this other kind of secondary option where it seems like through your company, through your investment company, through your company, you have worked out a way for really almost, anybody to invest. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So when we first started the company, it was a couple of friends of mine who went to high school with, and also like some church members and her husband. We got together and we wanted to kind of invest, start the company and invest in the West End. And so we probably started the company with maybe $50,000-$60,000 pooled together between 3 or 4 people. And then we started to look for properties to buy. And so what we do is we'll find a property, and if that property is $30,000-$40,000, then we'll give people the opportunity to put $5,000 in, $10,000 in, and we'll pool all of our money together, and then we will purchase that property, rehab it, and put a renter in it. So it's an opportunity for people who don't have the full $40,000 or the full $60,000, whatever that number looks like, and can't go it all by themselves. They will have an opportunity to at least be a part owner of a property, and then you can kind of build from there.
So I know that I've had a lot of friends that have wanted to do the same. I've thought about it myself. And I must admit, I was a bit naive. I kind of just thought, let's get some friends together, pool our money, and invest it wherever we want to invest it. Is there a legal structure around such groups?
Yes, you have to have a legal structure around something. I mean, obviously you can do it without the legal structure, but it's best to have a legal structure. And we have our legal structure is best to get with a lawyer and help you create your corporate structure, because you don't want any lawsuits down the line. And in that corporate structure, it kind of spells out, who owns what and how the business is run.
Wow.
But you definitely want to have some type of corporate structure.
Okay. So I have a live question from our viewers. And the question is, what characteristics should you look for when determining which friends to go into business with? Because we know that not everybody needs to be a business partner, and not everybody's money needs to be thrown in the pot. So what characteristics should we be looking for?
You probably want to look with somebody who's got conservative spending habits. If you've got friends out there that are flashy and they got the fancy cars and the big name brand shoes and all of that, then that's probably not somebody that you're not saying that you can't invest or partner with them, but you definitely want to have somebody with some saving habits versus some spending habits.
And is that because sometimes the people are really looking to kind of get rich, sort of say, are they spending a lot of money that they might be more tempted to kind of pull the money out of the investment prematurely, or that they might not be able to put their fair share in later on because they might have a cash flow issue? Why does kind of that become something that we should definitely be focusing and thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, there's different strategies to it, right? I come from the viewpoint of it's going to take a very long time to build your wealth, right? We're not going to go in here and we're not flippers, if you will, right? And so there's a lot of people out there that do flip, and that would be their strategy, and it works for a lot of people. But it's not a get rich quick type of scheme, right? So if you think that you're going to put in $20,000 and tomorrow it's going to be $40,000, then this is not the right company. You might want to get with a different flipper or a different investor that does the flipper model, right? So we put our money into the property, we upgrade the properties, and then it for that values to increase, and then we were thinking about selling that property in 2-3 years when the neighborhood comes up. So.
Cool, wonderful. So another thing, I know you talked about, putting legal structure around the group of friends, but I mean, aren't there some laws around, this? I know that Obama had during Obama's term, that the laws had switched a little bit to make this a lot easier for people to invest if they weren't a credit investor. Can you give us some background on that and how that kind of changed the landscape, especially for Black and brown communities?
Yeah, there was some crowdfunding type of laws, and when we started out, we kind of went that route, but the restrictions around some of those laws, like in the crowdfunding laws, it was too complex for us to go through, and the cost of compliance was really too high, right? So if you're going to go that route with where the Obama approved the crowdfunding, you have to be a part of like FINRA, and you have to pay these fees. It's $2,000 a year just to be a part of FINRA. You got to file with like the SEC, and so that's a whole completely different type of model. What we do is private equity investing, right? So you can, I don't know what the exact number of people, maximum number of people that you can crowd fund or put in to pool your money with, but 10, 15, 20 people pulling their money together, that's a different thing than going out to the general public and saying, hey, I think there's a buytheblock.com that does it, and they're accredited and approved, FINRA approved, but you can put in $25 or $100 or $1,000, and you can get a lot of different investors to invest with you. That's a completely different thing than what we do. We stay private and keep it amongst us. And so we can't go to the general public and ask for funds. Otherwise, we would have to go this FINRA route and this crowdfunding.
Okay, I mean, I like that structure. So as long as you are, just you and a couple of friends, and it's a very private nature, that's fine. I know we had Dana Cosby, she's a lawyer, and she was on the session yesterday, and her and I had talked about this, and she was, kind of giving cautionary tales. We didn't talk on the segment about it, we talked about it outside of this context, and she was giving cautionary tales, but sometimes people don't understand the difference. And so they're really doing, a private equity situation, and suddenly they're on Facebook saying, hey, who wants to invest with us? And it's a very different legal system that's set up with that. Is there any advice you have to people that, are doing going the private equity route, just to make sure that they don't end up steering in a side that they're not? I mean, are there some resources where people can educate themselves about the difference between those two, the pros and the cons of it?
Yeah, you can go to probably the SEC website. You can look up FINRA and just search funding laws. And you don't want to go. You don't want to. They're probably not going to come after you if you're doing something like very small. But if you're building like a website and you're going out to the general public and you're soliciting funds from people. If you do it too big, then the SEC is probably going to come after you, right? And so you don't want that trouble.
Right.
You definitely don't want that trouble. So what you want to do is you want to keep it off social media, you want to keep it off the general public, and you want to keep everything private. It's okay for you to send an email to 25 friends and say, hey, we want to go buy properties, who's interested. But as soon as you get out into the social media world and you get out into and start building websites and attracting funds, then it's a great area, right? So you really want to read up on that.
Wonderful. So we have a few more questions that's come through the chat stream that I want to make sure I get to. So the first one is, in this climate we are in other words, in context of Black and Brown community, should we be more or less willing to work with our friends? So, a lot of eyes are on the Black and Brown community. People want to know, should they be concerned about that? Is that a concern for anybody?
I don't think so. I think it just depends on who you consider a friend, right? So, and it depends on what your strategy and your model is, right? And so it depends on how much money you have, right? And so if you've got $10,000 and you're looking at a $50,000 problem, you may be able to go to the bank and use that and get the bank to give you the rest, and you can go it alone. Our strategy has been we wanted to buy everything with cash. So if there's a $50,000 property, I would put up $20,000 and somebody else would put up $20,000, someone else put up 10, and it just depends on who those investors are, and it depends on how you set your contracts up. Internally in the Sponsor for Success family, I've got 3 other partners, 4 including myself, right? And so when we go out and buy another property, I can set the contract up and say, okay, you're gonna put your money up, but you're gonna be a silent partner, right? So we're gonna do all the work, we're gonna do all the management, you'll be a silent partner. Or you can do it a different way. I've got deals where people invest and I guarantee them 8 to 10% of their money, regardless of what happens with the property. They are guaranteed their money, and I'll do it for 2 or 3 years, and then I'll give them their money back after that 2 or 3 years. So there's different ways to structure it, and there's different ways to structure it, and you got to check who it is that you are going into business with.
Wow. So I have a question before I get to this next chat stream, because you talk about there's different ways to structure it. And I really want to get down to the nuts and bolts, because sometimes we want to do something and we're like, well, we know that there's something we need to be doing with it. If I'm going to start an investment club, like where's the first place I can start to just get my hands on the rules, or is there an application process? How do I, where do I start? You talked about doing this with friends and putting some sort of a legal construct around it. What's the first step? Once I got my friends, we got our money, we're ready to roll. What do we need to do next? Go find a property, or how do we formalize this?
You're going to go talk to a lawyer first and set up your corporate structure, right? And then once you set your corporate structure up, then you can go. You need bylaws, right? And so somebody has to put together your bylaws, right? And so if one of you are skilled with legal lingo, you can do your own bylaws, but you have to have some type of structure. And then once you have that structure, then you can go out and start looking at properties. And then once you have the properties that you want to identify, then you can say, the people who have that are invested in the structure could come up with the money to buy the property, or you can go and get additional people to help buy the property, right? But you first before you start buying anything, you want to set your corporate structure.
So here's another question that we got from the live chat. And this one says, what are some of the best practices for maintaining a good business relationship when there are multiple investors? So whether they're friends or not friends, you're kind of almost married to these people. So how do you maintain a stable marriage, a good relationship in this?
I would say number one is communication. Like one of my partners, we talk every day, like every single day, all day. Right? Not all day, but we're texting back and forth, WhatsApping back and forth. And I'm in Germany, so I do a lot of WhatsApp. But you gotta have like communication, right? And so if you don't have that communication, and then one of your partners is like wondering what it is that the other partner is doing, that's a recipe for a kind of disaster, right? And so communication, I would say, is number one.
And now, Butch, do you also invest in startups and businesses? Are there other ways that people can pool their money and invest? Is it always real estate, or are there other opportunities?
There's other opportunities, and we do a lot of different things. We've got 3 different companies. We've got a nonprofit organization, and that one actually is just for we're raising money to help students, right? And then we have students in the community. So then we have a real estate company that's to invest in obviously real estate, and try to find a good property buy to rehab and put renters in it. And then we have a investment company where we provide micro loans to people who are servicing the community or have a business in the community, mostly in the West End. And so we provided loans to up to $50,000 to companies, and as small as $5,000, right? And so there's multiple ways to invest, and for us to invest in you and you to invest in us, right? So on the flip side of that $10,000, you could give us $10,000 and we would put it in one of our projects. So currently we are working on building a restaurant in a hotel. And so that deal is going to cost us probably 1.2 million, 1.5 million total. So if you had $50,000, then you would be able to invest that $50,000 with us.
Oh, wow. That's really good. I love that, those opportunities. And the fact that, you can invest with friends, you can invest collectively, and it doesn't always just have to be purely about the profit. I mean, here you are helping nonprofits, helping, young adults as they prosper through life, and basically literally investing in people and investing in the community. We had another question that came in through the live chat, and they want to know how many partners is too many? Is the room get crowded after 2 or 3? Is it, 10 or 20? Is 100 okay?
No, 100 is not okay. No, that's too many, right? And the reason it's too many is because the paper trail is too long, right? It's like you got to keep, I talked about communication earlier. I mean, you have to communicate, update 100 people on one project, right? I mean, on the flip side of that, 100 is not too many if you're doing a $25 million deal, right? That's, but if you're talking about a $50,000 house or $75,000 house, you don't want, 50 people on that, because there's no profit in the end, and it's real messy, right? So I would say, again, I've got 3 partners internally in our corporate structure, so it's 4 people. When we go out and buy a house, it would be probably 3 people total. So our corporation and then 2 other investors. When it comes to doing a deal like the restaurant and the restaurant/bar, that would be probably 3 investors, larger investors, and then we probably could take on 2 or 3 smaller investors, so maybe 5, and then we would go out and bring in probably that one we wouldn't do all cash, so we would go in and probably bring in some debt financing there. So yeah, it just depends on what the project is, but I would definitely say 100 is too much. Right.
Way too much. I have one kind of last question, then I want to wrap up with some advice from you. So, should someone be mixing and matching? I mean, sometimes we're just trying to fund, either an investment opportunity or fund our personal business or something like that in any way we can. And your personal advice, and I'm sure it's subjective, but in your personal advice, is it wise for somebody to kind of launch a crowdfunding campaign, and then also try to go out and find a strategic angel investor, and then also try to put a venture capitalist on their cap table? What in terms of a diversified capital funding opportunities and what people should be taking advantage of, should they really be mixing and matching when you're talking about this, collective funding thing, or is it best to kind of stick to one or the other, or is it, no rules?
I'm going to go with there's no rules, right? Each deal looks different, right? And I'll just, just talking about the houses, right? One house we bought, we used money from an investor that did not want to be really invested in the property. They just wanted to loan us money to use. So we'll pay them 8-10% out that money, and we'll hold it for 2 or 3 years or whenever we decide to sell the property, and then they'll get their money back, right? So they are happy with that 8 to 10% return investment. Then we've got another house where two investors wanted to be part owners. So we did a deal where our company owns 33% of it, and the other two investors own 33% of it. Right. So those are two different types of deals. And when it comes to the restaurant and the other projects that we're working on, we're getting into a project where we're going to need debt financing, we're going to need new market tax credits, we're going to need from the city, we're going to need all these different. We're going to need donations from larger nonprofits to help. We're going to build it from a nonprofit perspective. So all these different types of deals require different types of funding and different types of financing, right? So there are no rules to it, right? You get the money the best way that you can, and make sure that there's room for a positive ROI in there.
Awesome. Well, we don't have much time left, so the very last question I want to ask you is, I have friends, I have funds. What's the first step I do to actually get those friends with funds invested in something that's going to bring value and wealth to them?
With us or on your own?
On your own. So if I'm sitting in, let's say I'm sitting in Washington, D.C. right now, and I'm tuned in, and I know I got some friends with some funds, and I want to know, hey, look, we're going to get together. What's the first step? Like, do we find the property first? Do we set the legal contract first? What comes first? How do we know how much money we're pulling if we don't know what we're investing in? What's first, the chicken or the egg, and how do we just make that first leap out to really make it happen and kind of get it from just a casual conversation to a real thing?
First, again, like I said earlier, the first step is to build your corporate structure and invest in your infrastructure. Right, the first $50,000-$60,000 that we invested, it went into building the infrastructure of our company, right? And so you want to have that infrastructure, so and build that foundation so it doesn't fall apart, right? So we didn't go out and buy the house with the first $50,000-$70,000. We built the company with the first $60,000-$70,000. And then we raise more money to go buy the property. That makes any sense. So talk about the chicken before the egg, the egg before the chicken. It's better to build this foundation of your company, right? You're talking about, the accounting, the marketing, how you're going to do your taxes, the corporate structure between the partners, who owns what, 33%, 33%, 33%, right? You got to have all of that in line, and then you can take the next step. You don't want to go out and buy properties and then not have you realize that you got to pay taxes on those properties, and you don't have that piece of your company set up, right? So build your corporate structure first.
Well, Bush, I'm so glad, Bush, that we had an opportunity to talk with you. I could talk with you probably all evening, but it is probably, 12:30 p.m. your time, so I am sure you are itching to get into bed and to get to sleep, but we appreciate you being with us. Everybody, please stay tuned. We have more coming on the way. We're going to be talking with entrepreneurs about how to scale your business and basically grow it from being a small business to a corporation. We're going to talk with venture capitalists. We're going to talk with general investors and angel investors, and then we're going to hear some powerful tales from the front lines in terms of businesses that have flipped the pandemic. So please stay with us and stay tuned for the next segment.
The Wealth Builder movement isn't about money, it's about peace of mind, hope for the future, and fulfilling your God-given purpose. You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealth Builder Movement, an online collective advancing Black and brown wealth together. By joining our Facebook group and YouTube channel, you will learn from, invest with, and leverage others. Wealth is a group activity. Work, create, and build with others. Join the movement, the Wealth Builder movement.
Of marketing, branding, and photography. And also that guy from Common Conversations. When asked a question about wealth, I had to think about it for a minute and go back to when my grandmother and my mother came to this country. As an Afro-Latino, they came here with the idea that they would be able to build a legacy to hand down to their children and their grandchildren. And that afforded me the opportunity to start my first business when I was 11 years old. And I've been on that journey ever since. And so as you think about wealth and what wealth building is, it has different definitions. And throughout the paradigm of your life or your career, you might find that it changes, the definition changes, your goals change, your desire change. And mine has throughout that journey. When I first started out, I thought about wealth as being the most successful and tied that to having goobs and gobs of money. And then when I was younger, in my early 20s, that is what I sought out. That is what I ran for. And as time went on and I got married and then I had a child, and the companies that I worked for, whether they went out of business or sold, but transitions happened, I found myself as an entrepreneur and a family, and a father, a husband. And the idea of wealth changed. Wealth for me became about being healthy, educating my daughter and making sure that I'm building a legacy for her. When we started the business 13 years ago, so we started the business 13 years ago with the idea that we would build a legacy for my daughter, something that she could have, something that we could hand down to her and that she could build and or give it away, sell it, and get into a whole nother business. On top of that, being able to develop and build our community, make it better, be able to hire people that look like us, whether it's through traditional employment or even subcontract work. But that was the whole purpose, and that has been the new definition of wealth building, for at least for me specifically. If you talk to my wife, we have totally two different ideas sometimes, and that's a conversation, if you're married, that you're definitely going to want to have, because we're all going to grow both together and individually. And it's important to have goals, definitely if you're married and if you're single. Having goals, being very strategic in how you achieve those goals, and being very consistent as you're thinking about building wealth in this life. I'm Miguel Hampton. I own F5 Enterprises, and this is the Wealth Builders Movement. Thank you.
Welcome back, everybody. We are so excited, as always. I'm always excited to have you guys come back with us. Well, we're excited to talk with you today about how do you go from incorporated to beyond. So in other words, how do you scale from just kind of a mom and pop business or maybe just a company of one beyond that? How do you put structures in place to do that? And what are some missed opportunities that we find in our communities and other communities where people just because they don't know, not being able to get their business to the next level? I am here with several guests. We have a few virtual guests again, and we're excited to have them. But we also have Leif Taylor here in person, the man, the myth, the legend. You might remember him such things as Wakanda when we were all Wakanda forever.
Of course, of course.
We also have virtually, again, Louis Legier joining us back, and he's going to be sharing some now, not so much from the real estate perspective, but again, from the entrepreneurial perspective with his business. And then, of course, Z Ali. And Z Ali of Z Swag really is a fascinating story because he's gotten into this, what we call the lean scale-up methodology, and we'll be hearing about that. So how do you scale leanly and do it excellently? So Leif, I'm going to start with you because you have a fascinating background, fascinating story. First of all, tell us a little bit about the background of Wakanda. We know the name has changed now, but tell us about that starting off, and a little bit about your background as well.
Okay, so my background, I'm an artist, entrepreneur, designer, and our board of directors on a cooperative. So we started Wakanda. It was initially the Black Coin Group. My business partner, Lamar Wilson, we were doing a lot of like live streams on Facebook, and we were talking about Bitcoin back in 2017 when Bitcoin skyrocketed up to about 20,000 per Bitcoin. And so a lot of black people started rushing into the space, and so we started doing a weekly show talking about the effects of Bitcoin. So I'll just fast forward. On one of the lives, we were talking with some members of, that were on the live, and it was like, oh, why not just start a group? Like, one of the members suggested that we start a group, so we initially started off with 400 people. And, so the first, and then we scaled up to about 32,000 people in the group. And it was all around cryptocurrencies initially, but we started talking about investments and things like that.
Wow. So since we're on the topic and I want to hit it and quit it, let's talk about it. Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Where are we at with that?
So, yeah, it's kind of an awkward space, especially one of the things that we would tell, we're talking about scaling businesses and things like that. One of the things we would always, do with black people is like we get in things late, right? When I first got into Bitcoin, it was like $132 a Bitcoin. And we were telling people constantly like, hey, get into this, get into this. So now, right, like I said, it skyrocketed in 2017. Right now it's hovering around like $9,200 per Bitcoin. So as somebody that was early, and I thought I was late to it, right? As somebody that's been in it for quite a while, it's kind of one of those fluctuating things that if you're not looking to stay in it long term, I wouldn't recommend somebody just jumping in it without understanding what they're doing. Oh,
wow. So the other thing I want to talk to you about is we just had a segment called, Friends with Funds.
Yep.
And, you actually as well have kind of, seems to me, it's leveraged this group to actually create an investment fund. So with turning this community into something where we can actually create a vehicle for people to make wealth with it. Can you talk about that?
Okay, so yeah, there's actually been several businesses that have benefited from the group, and actually even more than that. So we had somebody in the group raise over $600,000, another person raised about $500,000. And so what we did, my business partner and I, Lamar, we had this thought about, cooperative economics, and we had been thinking about it from the very beginning of when we first got into Bitcoin. So we just basically talked to the group about leveraging, group economics in terms of collaboration and having a democratized way of investing. And so that's generally what it is. And, it's not a get rich quick kind of thing. We try to explain to people, if you're looking to spend money and get it overnight, this is not the group for you. This is more long term, and the goal is to build economic wealth as a group for all of us, so that not one person benefits.
Well, how do you guys, now you said it's democracy, so how do you guys decide what you're going to put that money into?
Right. So we have a board of directors. Like I said, there's three of us on the board of directors, and what we do is we sift through all of the proposals, and then once we find a stable amount of proposals, we put it out to the group and let the group vote. Because that's how cooperatives work, right? One share, one vote kind of thing. So that's what we do, and everybody votes on what they want to do at that particular moment.
Now, before we move on to the other guests, you have another interesting story because we're really focused on this particular panel about this whole issue, talking about economies of scale, talking about how do we scale up a business and get it moving beyond the ground floor. So in this context, can you tell me about your background? I know this is a business that you have left, but I think it's so powerful to tell the story, both of the things that we've gotten into that have been successful and the things that we got into and we realized, let's get the heck out of this as fast as we can. So tell me about that, because there's some really interesting things about the business concept itself and the investment opportunity that kind of approached you in that.
Okay, so real quick, so we started off at the very bottom, me and my business partner, like I said, Lamar Wilson, shout out to him. And we were, just a shop where we would do services, we would build websites, we would do all kinds of things, right? And then we got tired of that kind of hustle and bustle of service, so we moved into product. We had an initial product that we got funded by the state that didn't do so well. And then it was like, okay, we got into the whole blockchain space, starting with Bitcoin. We started with the Bitcoin wallet, and then when we did that bootstrap, just he and I just put, we put in our own money, just to work on it. And then what we started doing was, with our first business, we came to Louisville quite a bit and we would pitch a lot. We got used to the concept of pitching. And then from there, it was like, okay, how can we scale this thing up? So we got into 6 accelerators.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so we got into 2 accelerators at once. We got into an accelerator in California, and we got into an accelerator in St. Louis. And the one in California, what we would do in terms of scaling and going to ask for money, I saw where you had Ms. Cosby on. And, it was really, we built our own social network in the Valley. We would literally go door to door and meeting people for the first time, ask them for money.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's something that, you know, we as a people tend not to do. We're afraid to, you know, you're afraid to ask your neighbor for something,
Yeah.
let alone ask a complete stranger, like, hey, can we get a couple $100,000?
Yeah.
Right? And so we were able to raise like $2.5 million doing that process, you know, because the more we pitched, the
Yeah.
more we met people, and the
Yeah.
more they saw us, the more consistent our names became. And plus, we were kind of the only two black dudes at the time in the whole blockchain Bitcoin space. So that allowed us to constantly build momentum behind, you know, getting investors on. The first investor is not the hardest one. It's the second investor. And most people don't understand that, because once you get the second investor, then the third, fourth, and fifth, they kind of pile along.
Wow. So we have Demetrius Graves joined us
How you
here on
doing,
the
brother?
panel. I am going to, Demetrius, I'm so tempted. Demetrius has a wonderful startup, Weather Check. And I'm so tempted to ask you about investment questions, but we have another segment purely on investment, and Demetrius will be on that. So I'm going to hold my tongue and not ask you anything about investment. I'm going to try my hardest. But what I do want to ask you about is, how do you scale? You know, in the startup world, first of all, does a startup exist without a business model for scale? Is that even such a thing?
No, I think, you know, for us, it has been this sort of work in progress of trying to figure it out. And so you are continuously sort of redefining what that model looks like every single time you get a little bit of traction, and sort of saying, okay, well, now I can go a little bit further. And so it's always sort of rephrasing and reframing the conversation as you kind of encounter new opportunities, new customers, new territory.
So I'm going to rewind just a little bit, take a step back. First of all, what's a startup versus a small business? And what does it even mean to be scalable? What does that word mean? What is that concept?
Well, you know, I think a lot of small businesses have a sort of revenue model in sight, typically. It's normally short run, as a known commodity. For a lot of startups, they're really trying to figure out what is the thing, you know? And so for us, I mean, it's still something that we're thinking about every single day, like, how do we actually make this work? Where's the real opportunity? You know you have an innovation, but you're not quite sure. And so that's the whole sort of notion of a kind of like starting it up, like, versus opening a bakery or, you know, something where we know people like donuts.
They're gonna go get those donuts.
Right.
So along those lines, what's a scalable startup mean? What does that mean when you're saying scale?
Well, I mean, I think it's this notion that, like, once you sort of perfect a model, that you can sort of move and matriculate through. Like, you can sort of take this sort of one thing that worked really, really well in Louisville, Kentucky, and sort of see it sort of multiply and become exponential. And so for us, it started out just that way, this sort of like, oh, maybe this weather check sort of thing might work here, but this sort of idea that, oh, well, it actually works everywhere. And this sort of notion that it works everywhere sort of becomes this sort of idea that you can then carry around, not just your state, not just your town, but really the nation, the world even. And what you'll typically know it because you'll start getting people telling you, hey, you could apply that over here, or you can apply that over there. And so that's some of the sort of hallmarks or the fruit of what it looks like to have something that really is scalable, where people are like, hey, this has far more applications than what you can even see. And that's often true.
Wow. So that's a good segue into Z Ali. Z is joining us virtually. And Z, I want you to talk specifically first about your background, you know, but then kind of come in on this conversation about scale. How do I actually plan for scale? Z, are you with us? Can you hear us?
I can hear you guys. Thank you for having me. So, quick background, I started my business, well, I've started many businesses, but I started the business that I run now, swag.com, when I was about 19 years old with about $800. And the short story of it is I was selling chef uniforms out of my trunk, going classroom to classroom at culinary school, selling the uniforms. I would buy them from the flea market, and these were defective coats. I would take them home because they needed some fixing. My mom and I would wash them up, fix whatever needed to be fixed up, and then we would iron them, pack them back up, and I would put them in a duffel bag and go door to the college to sell chef coats. And we went from selling chef coats to then chef pants, and then chef knives, and then pastry sets. And then now we offer over 1 million different SKUs, and we have partnerships with brands like Nike, Under Armour, Patagonia, Tumi, just world-class brands. And now our focus is more so providing merchandise, not just chef apparel, but just general merchandise to help companies elevate their brand and them deliver a joyful, memorable brand experience.
Now, can you tell us, I mean, you said you kind of start out in this very small, you and your mom just, hey, we're just gonna be doing this really small, and now you've scaled to all these different product lines and different business opportunities. But when you were just starting out, or how does someone just starting out, how do they plan for scale? How do they plan to sort of say, for lack of a better term, I'm going to say franchising. It's not the same thing, but to a layman, I think we all understand the concept of a franchise. There's a McDonald's everywhere. There's a McDonald's, sitting outside the temple in China, right? But how do we basically plan for that scale, though, so that we can actually scale without losing sight of the revenue that we're bringing in the small business? And that question
Definitely.
is for
So
you.
if you're a startup, so if you're a startup, you want to test a lot. You don't have a clear roadmap. You're just taking a foot forward each day. And as you take, more steps each day, you'll start to figure more things out, what's working, what's not working. And in order to get to that franchise type model, my recommendation would be to try to give yourself the vacation test where you try to remove yourself totally from the organization or have your leaders remove themselves and see if the team can function and if you can execute on your processes and systems and the deliverables. So if in McDonald's case, it's a burger, if you take away their managers, can the team deliver a delicious burger? Can the staff actually execute on everything that you have in place without that supervision? Is the team empowered to make decisions if there's an issue within burger? Can they make a free burger without calling a supervisor or the owner? So the vacation challenge is simple. If you document all of the procedures and the activity that you do on a regular basis, and you have your team in line with those procedures, and you build a culture of continuously improving upon each system and each process, because things will break. Customers won't be happy with certain things. Things happen. And so as these things happen in our company, we audit everything. So we document the issue, what happened. All right, let's collaborate, team. Let's get in a huddle. Let's figure out what happened. And then we find ways to improve on our processes. So the iteration wheel continues to get better and better. And the goal is, if you want to build a franchise, you ultimately need to remove yourself and have the business fully self-sustaining. And so the challenge is slowly removing yourself off the schedule day by day until you're completely off and it's working like a machine and there's growth. So phase one would be, don't expect growth, just expect the car to run, and then you want the car to take off in phase two of the implementation of doing this vacation challenge. That's a really good way to test how strong your procedures and processes are.
So with McDonald's, I know they got a recipe for that burger somewhere. So are you telling me that we need a recipe for what we're doing in our business no matter what we're selling?
You need a recipe for everything. I'm willing to bet they have a step-by-step guide on how they wash their bathroom. They probably have a guide that says where they need to start mopping first, when they should clean the toilets, what needs to happen. It's very documented, every single step of it. Same thing goes for their openings. They've got every single thing outlined in mind-numbing fashion. So the way I try to work is, I figure maybe I might not wake up tomorrow. What if I die today? What happens to my business? Does my team lose their jobs? Does everybody panic? And if you work in that mindset that, hey, maybe you might get sick tomorrow. So if you're sick, your team is dependent on you, and that's a problem. And so if you document things in such a mind-numbing fashion, then people shouldn't have to worry or panic. They should be able to take the baton from you and run with it and have very little to no questions.
That's awesome. Louis, are you with us on the line still?
Yes, I am.
Louis, I like that analogy that Z says you can take the baton and run with it. Tell us about Home Improvement Pros. Tell us about your industry, your entrepreneurial background. But, is there a baton that you are really hoping that, somebody could run with in your organization? Are you looking at franchising Home Improvement Pros? Are you looking at scaling it and taking advantage of other business opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to my home improvement business, I wouldn't per se say franchise, because I like to have a model that people can follow and then stay involved. But I do plan on expanding. That's one of those things where I'm one that has big goals and dreams and plans, where I think, locally in Kentucky, then Midwest, then regional, then national, and then international. So that's any business I'm involved with, that's my thought, right? I like to keep my mind open. I mean, people like to forget, the human brain is made to keep you safe, right? So the second you tell yourself can't do something, it then goes to rest, right? But I like to say, how can I do it? And in that way, it's always working. I'm always thinking, I'm always planning. But when your brain is at rest, it feels like it's protected you. You've had no changes. You're not trying to scale a business. I also think that every business is scalable. The word scaling, it depends on who's using it, right? If I go from 1 to 3, that's scaling, right? From an investor standpoint, you say scaling, I don't want you to go from 1 to 3 because that's not worth their time. But I think any business, it can be lemonade stand or et cetera, as long as you're thinking about ways to make it better, you can improve that and then grow. And scaling is not for everybody. Some people like to have a smaller shop where they know the 10 people that are coming in every day, and they know their names, they know their family, and that's great, right? And it just depends on what people want to do. I like the scaling model because it gives me the opportunity to help others and their family, and that's big for me. That's one of my major focuses, is how can I help other people? And to do that, I have to have those positions.
So you raised a good point, which is there are certain investors where if you're not scaling it to a certain amount, they feel like, maybe that's not worth my time. Dimitri, can you talk about that? We're not talking about investments. I'm dangerously in the territory, but from a perspective, if I was thinking about scaling my business and raising capital for it, is there a benefit to making a plan for scale that you can actually show to an investor, something very clean and clear to them, that you got a pathway forward?
Yeah, I think at its core, it's all about the profits, right? Like, at the end of the day, there is going to be somebody out there who wants a piece of your profits, whether it's an investor, whether it's the guy who's trying to sell you something, who comes knocking on your door. I've been in both types of businesses where I'm, in a large technology play today, but it used to be that I was in the construction business, and it was the same way. It's really all about sort of profits, and when you're sort of thinking about that conversation and what the benefit is, it really is more about, like, do the profits support the sort of return? And so when you're sort of saying, okay, well, hey, I've got this really big idea, well, it's really more about, oh, well, how much profit do I think I'm really going to make? How big do I think this opportunity is? And sometimes it is easier just to get an investor when the idea is larger. You'll find certain money, and this is certainly true in the United States today. There's so much capital out there that it takes as much time to sort of vet your business idea on a large level as it does on a small level. And so, I think the race is given to those who have big ideas today, because it takes a lot of work to get through those deals.
So I have a follow-on question to that, and this live chat question actually is right on what I was thinking. So this is coming live from the chat stream, and Leif, I'm going to kick it to you. Okay. And then Z, I'm going to pause a moment because I actually want to hear your perspective on this as well. So Leif, a lot of people are starting businesses right now. Yep. At what point do we have to transition from a home front business to a more storefront corporate mentality?
Like my man said on the screen, it depends on what you want out of your business, and even touching on some of what Z mentioned, the fact that he had a business model. A lot of companies don't have business models yet. So we talk about scale prematurely sometimes because they don't even know where they're going to make money. So I would say start with making money first, or have, like you said, have the big idea and take it straight to an investor. Because, you know, we talk about scale, 0 to 1 is a lot more appealing to some people than from 1 to 3, right? And so you have to know who the investors are, you have to know who to target, and one of our investors told us sometimes you have to go where the money is. And so if you're thinking about scaling your business, small, medium, or whatever, figure out what that looks like and how can you articulate it to get somebody else to want to get a piece of that profit, because you got to convince them that there's profit to be made.
Wow. So Z, kind of as a same line of this question for you, I want to hear your perspective. You know, is there a difference? Should I always have a corporate mentality, even if I'm doing a mom and pop shop, or is there a time to kind of switch it on or switch it off?
Yeah, like the gentleman said, it all comes down to what you want out of your business. Everybody doesn't want a very large scalable business. I can tell you, I personally don't want to manage 100 employees, or I don't want to. We have about 10 people. I want to stay small. I want to stay lean. I want to stay very profitable. So the corporate mentality, I don't even know what that is. I've never had a corporate job. So if you want to rephrase the question, I'll try to give you a better answer.
Okay, so Z says we're not even going to answer this. Pass. Well, you know, I actually do want to talk about, I have a perspective on this, and I want to see if you guys resonate with this or not, which is that you should always have a corporate mentality. If a corporate mentality means operating with plans, processes, operating in excellence, I think that might be what this particular question is getting at. I think they're wondering, at what point should I be thinking about the future and future profits and thinking about how I can grow the business? You know, sometimes we start businesses and we just are kind of, you know, we just got into it. You know, so I guess the question, you know, if I could rephrase it a little bit more, let's put it this way, you know, is it okay just to get along and chug along, or should you have an actual plan, even if that plan is, I just want a small business? And I'll ask Leif, maybe I'm going to kick it to you. I'll kick it to Leif, and then Z, I'll let you go back at it.
Yeah, you should always have a plan. I mean, because the reason you go into business is to make money.
Yes.
And so if you don't have a plan, then if something in the market changed, COVID, right? Protest. All those things change the market. So if you don't have a plan on how to execute, how to pivot, like my man was talking about earlier, then you will fail. What they say, I was watching the talks earlier, 50% of all minority businesses have failed because of that, because of those changes. So if you don't have a forecast in mind of how your business will operate, it will not last, especially in today's economy.
Wow. So we only have a little bit of time left. Z, I'm going to let you kick this off, and you can include your response to this and that, but keep it brief in 30 seconds. What is your one piece of advice to those businesses that are considering scale, and anything you can give them, words of wisdom on that?
Okay, so first I'll say, instead of corporate, I think profit mentality is the right way. So we all start, a lot of us, side hustles while we're working and we're starting this business. Eventually, if you want to grow it and be more profitable so you can do more of what you love and help people through your company, through your products and services, you need to put things in place so that you can grow that business. You can't do everything. So you have to have the right people in place. I'd say people is probably the most critical piece for you to scale your business and grow your company. I highly recommend the book Who for hiring. People is everything. I wish I invested more time in learning how to bring out how to hire, who to hire, when to hire. I think hiring is the single-handedly one of the most critical components for any small business. Hire good people, you will scale really fast.
Demetrius, same question. What one piece of advice do you have for businesses that are trying to grow, trying to scale?
You know, ultimately, don't ever underestimate how long it's going to take. It's always going to take longer. And like, I'm guilty of this, but if you'll exercise some patience, I think that's why the plan becomes so important. Because if you're exercising the plan, then you can sort of deal with the fact that, you know, even though it's taking a little bit longer, even though it didn't happen in the time that you expected it to happen, it will get there. Because a lot of times, you're just really waiting on your preparation to meet the opportunity. And so it really is about sort of creating an overall bit of runway. So save up, be lean, eat ramen noodles, whatever you need to do until that opportunity arrives, because it's on its way. You know, it just takes time.
Smack your lips on some ramen noodles.
Yeah, maybe not ramen. Maybe not ramen.
Maybe not ramen.
Beans and rice.
Beans and rice. So, Leif, we pretty much have maybe 15 seconds for you.
All right, price. A lot of companies don't price correctly, especially minority companies. They price too low, and they don't have enough profit to do anything with. So pricing.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you guys for joining us, both physically here and virtually. Please stay tuned for our next segment. We have more on the way. We're talking about real estate. I'm not talking real estate investment, business investment, venture capital, how to raise funds for your business, and then we are also going to be talking about pandemic pivots. So please stay tuned and bear with us as we move forward in this program.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Charles Babb, CEO and CXO, that's Chief Experience Officer for Fairchild Consortium. I'm here to talk to you about one thing and one thing only: raising capital right now. I know we're in a time of crisis. I know we're going through a pandemic. We're in economic upheaval right now, but this is the best time to raise capital for your company. The reason it's the best time to raise capital for your company, because in moments of crisis and calamity, empires are built. People see problems, people think of solutions, and people figure a way to monetize those solutions. In the world where everything's more digital and people are staying home more, there are tons of tools that need to be made. At-home offices, new telecommunication tools need to be made. New apps need to be made. Delivery services need better tools to deliver to the people at home and people that actually go into the office. Information needs to move faster and swifter than it's ever had before. And that's why you need to raise funding right now. So I'm advise you to first, plan your work, make a business plan, make a schedule, make a scope plan, and make a budget. And then you work your plan. And that is first take your schedule and make sure you have your fundraising rounds in there, built in, and you start knocking on doors. There are hundreds and thousands of corporations that need new services to support what they already deliver to customers right now. So I advise you, take your time, figure it out, and get it done. Knock on all the doors. You have nothing but time on your hands if you're at home, if you're unemployed, or you're unable to go to work. Spend an hour a day to figure out how to raise money for your company. And I advise you, I say it again, raise that money and get your business moving in the right direction. With that, I wish you all a good day. Talk with you soon. Peace.
Welcome back to the Wealth Builder Movement. I am so excited about this segment. I mean, I've been excited about every segment, so you know I'm going to say that when it starts out, right? We are talking about investing in businesses, how you can raise money for your businesses, how you can get that money because you need it. We're going to be talking about venture capital. We're going to be talking about angel investors. We're going to be talking about bootstrapping. And I'm here with my wonderful panelist, Demetrius Gray, from our previous segment. For those of you just checking in now, Demetrius Gray, CEO and founder of WeatherCheck. We have Moses. Now, Moses, I don't want to butcher your last name. Nobody wants to hear that. I want to call you Icy Ishaka. Is that close?
It is close. It's very close. Itishaka.
That wasn't close. Itishaka. Okay.
Good.
All right. Sounds better when you say it. So we are here with them. And so we're just going to launch right into it because I know we're going to have a lot of questions on the chat stream for this particular segment. So, Demetrius, as a founder of a startup, you've done, what some people might consider more of a small business thing. We're in the contracting world. You've switched to this high, fast-paced startup. You've done accelerators like Y Combinator. For those of you who don't know, that's the premier accelerator in the U.S., maybe even in the world, I would say, in the world. So Demetrius, tell us first, we didn't hear too much about that, but tell us first about WeatherCheck how you got that going, and where that idea came from.
Yeah, so I mean, it was pretty sequitur for me. I was in the storm contracting business. I owned a roofing company, and truthfully, that sort of like got to a point where I ran out of capital. I was basically $500,000 in debt, and I needed to figure out how to get out of that business. And so I really started looking at other technology plays, and so started saying, man, wow, technology really matters, even in construction, and I was still early. And so I started asking this question of like, why insurance companies don't tell their policyholders when they have severe weather claims, and sort of didn't know that was a novel question. And so today now WeatherCheck is known as the Carfax for severe weather damage. We monitor over 4 million insured households throughout the continental United States. And like almost 180,000 people have come to our site and signed up and said, hey, monitor my house in real time. And so that's how we kind of started. I didn't expect for it to sort of grow into the thing that it's become, but we're a team of 11 and have raised about $2.1 million since we started 2 years ago.
Wow. So I'm going to launch right into it. You know, you start this startup, as the name is called. And, you know, like you said, you're kind of, you know, coming out of this debt situation. You know, where were you first looking to raise money for this startup? Did you go immediately to the venture capitalists? Did you go immediately to the angel investors? Or was there some other track that you went?
No. I mean, I had actually pitched the company 2 years prior. I'd gone to our local chamber and pitched the idea in one of those sort of things that they host, and I lost. I lost to somebody who had an idea for a 3D nail printing salon. So like you put your hand in a 3D printer and it would paint your nails. That never happened, by the way, even though she won.
Sound a little salty there, Demetrius.
You know, it still hurts. And so, but like I started looking at grants. And so the first grant that we were awarded was a grant here locally in the city of Louisville, which was a sort of non-dilutive, and when I say non-dilutive, I mean it just didn't take any equity. They gave you the money, but you had to basically spend your own money first. So it was like $75,000. At the time, I didn't have $75,000, and so I was like, I got this grant, but I can't spend it. And so that's eventually sort of where the first investor came from, and then we went on to sort of win more awards that came with cash prizes and stuff like that.
Wow. So that's a good segue to Moses. Moses, you are one of the principals at Access Ventures. Can you tell us a little bit about Access Ventures and your background, how you kind of got into this investment world?
Yeah, so Access Ventures is a little bit unique in the world of sort of venture capital and investment management in that it's actually a foundation. So it's a private operating foundation with kind of the charge or the mission of building a more inclusive and creative economy. And so, you know, one of the things that makes AV unique is that, you know, most foundations tend to deploy, or at least the IRS minimum of assets that need to go into either programs or program-related investments are about 5% annually. And so you can get into a situation where a foundation, you know, is deploying 5% of their endowment toward their mission. 95% is sort of, it's in the market, or it's with various fund managers, kind of really optimized just for growth. And you know, it's a good model. I mean, it allows for foundations to survive for, you know, decades or longer. But you know, there's a big, in that situation, up to 95% of your assets may not be, you know, kind of aligned with your mission. So AV, you know, has really been working toward and is among a group of foundations around the country that are trying to deploy 100% of the assets of the foundation toward the mission. And that's kind of where I come in. That has led us to do quite a bit of direct investing from the endowment. And my background is in more traditional venture capital. I joined AV as, you know, this mission was continuing to grow and take shape to help manage the direct investments we place from the endowment.
So as someone that kind of came from the venture capital world to more of a greater purpose organization,
yeah,
How was that switch? And our venture capitalists, are they really sharks? Are they all sharks? Is there a heart in some venture capitalists?
Yeah. No, I think, for me, it really was an experiment. I got into venture in the first place because I got really excited. I grew up, wanting to be a doctor. My parents were like, oh yeah, that's fantastic, go be a doctor, and I really fell in love through my undergraduate career with this idea of, just really leveraging capital toward, improving sort of communities that I cared about and supporting entrepreneurs and thinking through what that can do. As a doctor, you can have a really fulfilling career, sort of ministering to people directly. As a business owner like Demetrius, or if you're sort of involved in spinning up businesses purposefully, you can have a really sort of, I got really excited about that. And so I was always kind of masquerading in the traditional venture world. I also kind of have a very, I have a pretty specific view on what it looks like from kind of maybe a macro perspective in deploying capital in responsible ways. And it's always been a tension to me that, hey, can you be, conscious and also a good business owner? And it's been an interesting experiment, an interesting kind of question. And that's when the opportunity at AV came about, that interest, I couldn't stay away, It was
unresistible. Well, when we segregate angel investors from venture capitalists, actually, let me rewind. Demetrius was an angel investor.
Well, I think there's no better term than angel in a lot of cases, because they're exactly that. I think what you can actually find sometimes is that some of your angels turned out to be devils if you're not careful, because especially when you start to realize that whatever the thing is that you were thinking about actually starts working. Like, you're like, oh wow, I shouldn't have given that person 20% of my company. Because now this idea is enormous, and I needed the $100,000 or the $200,000, but angel investors are really those sort of first fruit people, right? They're the people who say, you know what, I'm really investing in you. I don't know whether or not this thing is going to sink, swim, float, fly, whatever, but I'm going to make the investment because I believe in you, the person, typically. And so, they're supposed to be your sort of ride or dies, but choose them wisely.
So the reason I brought that up is because Moses was making the point about, kind of a venture capitalist model, but for a greater good. And I think the perspective is always that angel investors, like you said, they're investing in you, they're investing because they're passionate about your cause. It's almost a little bit similar, like, Access Ventures and venture capital, they just want the hard dollars. Like, no, I don't want to hear about, your SAP store, I don't want to hear about what you're trying to do, just show me the money. Is that true, Demetrius? Have you found that, or are angel investors kind of going more towards that? Is there a combination somewhere?
So I'm gonna consider the audience that we're talking to. I would say traditionally for founders and people who are starting up who are something other than people of color or women, yes, that is exactly what VCs are. I think the trend and I think the data proves out that in a lot of cases, venture capital isn't going to be there for you in the seed stage. And so you might spend a lot of time and energy sort of pitching into the wind in some cases because your idea may not resonate. And so it's a challenge. I think there's a lot of sort of new funds out there that are trying to solve that problem. But I think it's sort of the combination of what the previous panel was talking about around this sort of having the plan for scale, and your plan as a sort of founder of color may look different than what the prototypical plan will look like. If you're reading a book by Eric Ries called The Lean Startup, you might not follow that model to the T because the capital just isn't there. And so, that's sort of my general perspective around early stage VC. Although we've had some great investors out there and Y Combinator and all that great stuff, it just, for the most part, was mostly a waste of time before we had cash and numbers.
And numbers, you have to back it up. And that raises a good point, because I can hear you're itching to get in on that, Moses.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's exactly right, Demetrius. I think another way to think about it is the moment you go to raise money, to go raise capital, you're either going to wind up with a partner or a boss or kind of some combination of those two. And when you raise money at the angel level, because like if you start, you own 100% of your business, typically at the angel level, you still retain a good chunk of control. And what you're really getting is someone who believes in you, who may be active in that space and can really be a partner, a thought partner. Venture and institutional venture tends to be, still it's the same thing, right? A lot of people say, hey, I'm not just looking for money, but I'm looking for, expertise. And I think there are really helpful things that a venture investor can bring to the table, but because of the check sizes that they'll write, or the percentage of your business that they'll buy, or the structure of that investment, they tend to be kind of like a partner boss, and you can no longer unilaterally decide to sell your business or which direction you go in. And so you really have to weigh those things when.
And in some cases, actually a lot of cases used to be the case, and I think now you have the rise of the rock star, founder, and that's kind of had a resurgence. But the old model was, they invested in a business, and the first person to get kind of demoted, sort of say, was those founders, because they could afford to bring in experienced CEOs. And it's not a bad thing for the business, because have someone experienced and get you your money quicker too. But now I think you see a little bit more kind of keeping if the founder has some charm, some presence, some whereabouts. We have a question from the live chat stream, and I'm going to read it out. And then I'm going to actually ask Demetrius if you would take the first stab at this. So what are some no-nos when asking for funds or supports?
Well, I think the typical one is like, don't ask them for a non-disclosure agreement. Like people don't do NDAs in investing anymore. It just shows that you don't know what you're doing. And so like there's a level of competence that you want to display. And the best practice in my mind for that is by, like going out and Googling like what other like sort of large recognized startup accelerators are doing. You're gonna get a lot of no's. And so, and then I think the secondary piece is like deal with your emotions well before you start the fundraising process. Don't take it personally. They're gonna say no, like it just happens. And you should really just sort of, thanks for your consideration and move on. You live in the United States of America. We have more capital than anybody else. Just keep looking. You'll find it eventually.
And I like that point of don't get in your feelings. I know when I was had just started my business, it was just a thought. We were just kind of pitching in competitions and stuff. And I got these hard-hitting questions that had nothing to do with really the value. It was like below the belt, and so I left and I thought, man, we really blew that. And went back, I shed a tear or two, got a little weepy. And then the next day they were like, oh, you were their favorite. And so I think part of that kind of don't get your emotions involved is like, then I learned, after that experience, I never really got emotions like, oh, okay, when they start hitting below the belt, it doesn't really mean, it just means they ran out of smart things to say, so they're just gonna kind of go. But then, and also they're processing by tearing down and trying to build back up. So just seeing like how resilient are you gonna be to their attacks, and how well do you know your model? So Moses, with that being said, if I'm pitching to an angel investor versus pitching to a venture capital firm, are the pitches different? So, is the pitch deck different? Is the presentation different? Should I be slanting to a different, perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think yes. I think that's also, a lot of times the product of the fact that your company is different, typically. When you're pitching to an angel investor or an angel group, you're really early on, like Demetrius said, typically. And so, you may just have an idea with some bit of traction. And what you really need to do in that pitch deck is, set the stage for that idea and really sell that idea. Once you get into kind of later stage venture raises, you've got an idea, you've got some early validation of the idea, but what you're really trying to do is demonstrate, hey, this is, this is past kind of that idea stage. Here are some metrics that, that really validate my model, or that really validate, selling into this market that I'm pursuing. And so it is a little bit different. But you also, I think, naturally kind of have those tools based on where the life of your company is.
So, Demetrius, somebody told me, may have been Dana Kazi from our segment yesterday, that you were really good at really bad pitches.
Oh.
Crafting really bad pitches. So, and this is, I'm just putting this out there. I would love it if you could give a really bad pitch, and Moses, could you ask him questions as if you were really evaluating his company, so that we could get an animation of this question? Because I think what they're wanting to know is, what do I do just not to look like a fool when I get up there? Demetrius, do you want to hold on to that thought? We'll circle back to that at the end.
Yeah,
or do you
I
want to?
could probably give you a bad pitch by the end of this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you have probably about 3 minutes to think of that bad
Okay.
pitch. Okay. The end is closer than you think.
I've been asked to do this before, so I'm ahead of schedule.
So while he's thinking about that, Moses, I also want to ask this question. You know, we're throwing out this word, you know, this term pitch deck. You know, we're talking about, you know, pitching. What does that really look like for someone that is maybe coming from the small business sector and they're used to writing a extensive business plan and going to the bank and getting a loan? What does it mean to pitch something? Like, is there a time limit to this? Are there visuals that you use?
Yeah. No, I mean, I think tactically, and it's different, you know, and tactically, I think it just looks like, most frequently it looks like a presentation. You know, you got 60 minutes, you sit down, you know, you've got, you know, so you explain your business, explain the market that you're in, and kind of walk through the story of the investment, or the story of, you know, the world as you see it and as your company sees it. I think, though, the most important thing in a pitch deck, that a lot of times you can get lost in that art of making a great pitch. I think the most important thing is in, you know, knowing and understanding where it is you're trying to go and what you know or believe about this investor, and trying to show that they align, or they sort of marry. And yeah, I think that's really what makes a fantastic pitch deck.
That's awesome. Demetrius?
Listen, are you ready for the pitch?
I'm ready for the pitch.
So, Moses, I've got this great idea. You know, I mean, you know, like I live downtown. I have this huge problem. You know, I can never quite figure out exactly, you know, how to get to my favorite restaurant. Terrible traffic, you know, roads are closed. There's a lot of civil unrest going on in our city right now. And you know what, I really think that there's an opportunity for, you know, this app that tells you exactly where to go, you know, and find your nearest restaurant. I really think that, I mean, I think it would be huge, you know, and I just, you know, I think people will really, and, you know, and we've got about 3 users already.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, how long has this been in the works?
Oh man, I've been thinking about it for a few years now. Yeah, and you know what, and I think, you know, you know, I just need about $1 million. $1
million?
Yeah.
All right, so what are you gonna do with $1 million?
Well, see, I've got a few friends who from college that I can bring on, and we're gonna set up an office down in Miami.
Okay.
Yeah, and see, you know, so we're gonna just do this coastal sort of thing. It'll be structured real nice.
Real nice.
Yeah.
No.
Real nice.
So tell me about the users. You know, who's the ideal user of this app?
Oh, you know them already, Pookie and Bebe now.
That's a bad bitch.
Okay, so Moses has had enough. We've all had enough. But
Yes.
you were being very, you know, I'll put it politely satirical, right?
Yes.
There are other words for it. But yeah, please comment on that. I mean, that's a very common pitch that people do.
Well, I think what more often than not, people don't do the research. So I was referring to Google Maps. Like, it already exists, right? And so there are a lot of ideas that you end up hearing that are like, they're already done. You know, like they're good ideas, but somebody already did them, you know? And so, and then like, so some of your nearest users, friends and family, really aren't the sort of traction that I think a Moses wants to hear. He wants to hear that you've gone out and gotten somebody who you don't necessarily know. Have you convinced somebody, you know?
Or that you can paint sort of the, you know, when I asked, you know, who are your users, you're kind of trying to see if you can, you know, talk to an archetype of a user. And a whole ecosystem of potential users, and why would they switch from Google Maps to your app?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And like at its core, there really are innovative opportunities. Like, I mean, if you think about some of the applications that are hot right now, whether we're talking about TikTok, you're like, isn't TikTok just like Vine?
Yeah. The
right?
rebirth.
Yeah. It's a rebirth of the same thing. And so there are sometimes opportunities to put a new flavor or sauce on something that was done before, but sometimes you've got to make sure that time has passed long enough, that there really is some market opportunity. And I think in that case, they had a lot of traction early before they started getting any investment.
Yeah.
And then I love the question that you kind of put out there, which was, how much money do you need? And you just threw something out. You were like $1 million.
Yeah.
Sounds good, right?
And I think a lot of people do that.
And
they just throw a number out.
And sometimes, like, you don't know exactly how much money it'll take for your business to get to that proverbial next step. But if you say $1 million, you should have sort of an idea of what you're going to put that $1 million towards, and what, kind of showing that preparation, showing that plan, kind of selling that plan and opportunity.
That's really great. So one thing that I want to end on with your guys' segment, and it's going to take maybe a little bit of time, not as long as the pitch, but Demetrius, I'm going to start with you. I want to ask you this question. I know that you do a lot of kind of just advising, just coffee conversations with founders. They're just saying, hey, I'm starting something. I'm trying to raise money for something. Trying to get off the ground. Can you share with us some of the most common questions that you hear from founders, and then your kind of advice to address those?
Well, I think a lot of them are around, how do I structure my ask, right? Like, how do I ask for money? And truthfully, I didn't have a good framework for it either until somebody gave me a picture. Here's how you're going to structure the ask. And typically it's saying, like, coming up with what it looks like, what the deal looks like, and how you're going to move them through that process well before you ever ask for the money. So your documents are already done. It's one of those areas where you do need to make the upfront investment before you actually go into the process, because every sort of step that you miss just delays the process. Like, you want to be like, oh, you need the financials? Here they are. Oh, you need this? There it is. You need and so you really want to have a sort of cadence so that you can get through it. I mean, I think that's principally the thing that is part of the reason why, and I would not be afraid of asking for money. Like, again, I keep echoing that, like, you live in the richest country on the face of the planet. If there's money to be asked for, it has to be here, right? And so you should go ask for it, and then try to perform or exceed the expectations of what you got, whether that's debt, whether that's equity raising, you decide, but that would be my approach.
Moses, I want to ask you a question. Again, you're coming from some parts of venture capital world, then coming from kind of a foundation investment arm perspective. You mentioned something about, Black and brown founders aren't often invested in. So what would be your cry to the investment community in terms of how we can get more Black and brown founders, businesses founded by Black and brown founders invested in?
Yeah, I think that, it's a question that we've been talking about for a long time, and I think, and I hope, the longer we talk about it, the more, the world kind of wakes up to what we're missing and what we're, sort of not doing well. Basically, I have hope, I think the challenge that I see is that it's really, it is a relationship business, kind of like Dana Cosby said yesterday. It's really driven by, I think most of the time, an investor will, kind of sending a pitch to an investor that you don't know is like, sort of dropping your resume on a career page. It's very rarely, even if there might be a fantastic match, sometimes, like, there's not enough time spent on your deck to discover that or to figure that out. And, there's just something about, a deal that comes from someone who you know, or introduction from somebody else that says, hey, I know you invest in these types of businesses, have you met, this particular entrepreneur, this is what they're working on. It kind of, it opens the conversation in a very different place than you can. I think, so what we really need is to figure out how to build kind of relationships across, ecosystems where there haven't been, a lot of crossover, and how, there's sort of like information, sort of lack of information that, or kind of information that has not been shared, or that hasn't sort of been opened up to a wider community, that prevents, would-be entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs who are working on a really interesting thing from matching with a potential investor. And so it's my cry, to rewind back to your question, to the investor community, is to find creative ways to really build relationships, not just to say, hey, we care and we're looking for them, where, like, where do we find them? Kind of think through, how do you find, deals today, and how do you, sort of step out of your own comfort zone in building relationships with either the person who will introduce you to somebody else, or kind of solve that matching problem.
I think adding on to that, there seems to be this glorification of venture capital, and this is my unpopular opinion for the day. I think it's a little overrated. There's a perspective that if a venture capital firm invests in a business, that somehow that business is more valuable. And like you said, a lot of the times that's just based off a relationship. Now, obviously, there's some core standards, but there's a lot of businesses that meet that core, foundational point. And so, as founders of color, what are some alternative ways that we can reach out? Because I know the founder of Calendly, right? He was talking about how he bootstrapped it. He couldn't get investment. He bootstrapped this, this phenomenal business. And so, what are some ways? And Demetrius, I'll start with you. Like some ways that founders of color can just kind of, go for venture capital, but aren't there other ways to get money?
Yeah. There are other ways. And shout out to Tope, who's the founder of Calendly. Every black founder in the country is looking at him like, oh my gosh, look at what you did.
Yeah.
And if you're not using Calendly, you should. But, I think first off, it's like the little foxes are the things that ruin the vine. Like if somebody can't trust you to pay back $50, then it's not going to go well when you ask them for $50,000. And so you need to start the groundwork today in how people deal with sort of lending you money. There are people in your network who have $50,000 in the bank, black people, but they're not really accustomed to lending money. And a lot of times their experience with lending money is bad. And so if you're a good investment, you certainly start by asking yourself that question. And that's how you sort of start that cycle of, like, what does it look like to raise? What works best in my ecosystem? Maybe it's that I'm selling something on the corner every afternoon. Maybe it's that, I'm asking for donations. Maybe it's that, because we're seeing it right now. There are a lot of people who are raising a lot of money just on an ask, like, hey, can you help me do this thing? And it might work better that way. There's no one size that fits all in terms of the method, which I think is part of the beauty. So wherever you are in the world, you'll figure out like what generates more traction. I think one of the gentlemen earlier was talking about experimentation. Like, you're just going to have to experiment, see what works. Just don't violate the law in the process. I think Dana would have me say that.
Yeah, stay out of jail.
Stay out of jail.
Team, stay out of jail. Moses, what about, you have any advice? I know Access Ventures tends to work with businesses that otherwise may not have gotten investment, but a lot of those businesses, have already kind of been bootstrapping and demonstrating some execution. What are some alternate avenues that you can go to raise capital if the venture capital firms just aren't in your scope?
Yeah, just start by highlighting what you said in the tee up, which is a lot of times we think, venture, that's what we see, like the venture sharks, or it's glorified in our culture, but it's just one tool belt, or tool in the tool belt, right? There are so many different ways to raise capital, and venture capital a lot of times is really the most expensive tool, and I think it really starts by not necessarily building your business for venture if you don't have to. Now, venture works really well if your business needs sort of a lot of money on a long-term horizon. Like there's some situations where it is the best tool in the tool belt, but I wouldn't, if I was advising sort of my brother or my sister who was starting their business, I wouldn't advise them to necessarily build it for venture or go to a venture capitalist. I think, traditionally bank debt, we all know you can go to bank, get a loan. I think that that is the lowest cost of capital for a business owner, but it also requires sort of the most sort of formulaic, like I need some cash flows, I need X number of years, and what have you. But there's a whole range of options in between, and actually, I lied, it's not even the cheapest. There's something even cheaper than bank debt, which Demetrius kind of took advantage of. It's a grant. If you're building the type of business that can lend itself to that type of capital, you need to overturn all those rocks before you head up to venture.
And most of them can. I think that would be the sort of final point that I would add on the topic is, like, for us, we've won over $1 million in grants, right? We just won a $250,000 grant to build a flood model for the state of Virginia. And it's like, that was government money. And so, I think the thing that you got to get good at, though, is applying, and sort of creating a framework. And that process and plan piece, once you have that infrastructure in place to consistently go after dollars, whether it's PPP money, whether it's EIDL, whether it's, award or prize or pitch, it's all the same.
Yeah, and for my company, MEMSTEM, again, we're in medical devices, which is a lot of grant opportunities for us, and we've done almost $5 million in grants. We haven't had to go outside, right, for investment. So it is overlooked. Well, that's all the time we have for today for this segment, but I do want to get you guys again for a longer segment because I think people have a lot of questions about pitching and investing and raising capital. So thank you guys for being here with us today. Thank everybody for tuning in to this segment. Please stay tuned. We are next going to be having a wonderful conversation about businesses that decided to pivot during the pandemic and really leverage what was actually a crisis situation and get opportunity out of it. Also, again, since we're talking about investment, you can invest in the Wealth Builder movement. So if you look in the chat stream, you will see a graphic that will show you just how you can invest in the Wealth Builder movement as well. And when I say invest, contribute to the cause. The other thing is you can invest in the Wealth Builder movement by just joining the movement. I mean, we have wonderful people here that are part of the movement, and we just want to be a community to connect individuals. This is not about gurus. There's no solo icon, like Dr. Angelique Johnson is the wealth expert of the world. We're not about that. We're just about using the community and just leveraging everybody's knowledge here and knowledge there to make it work. So join the movement. You can do that by going to the website, www.wealthbuildermovement.com, and you can subscribe and you will get lots of information on things that we have upcoming. So please do join the movement, and we will be right back after this short little break. Stay tuned.
Hi, my name is Stephanie Collins, and I'm the CEO of Anywhere Faith. When asked about wealth building, especially as a millennial, as a young girl from Chicago, I would be lying if I told you I knew in any way, shape, or form what I was talking about. As a person who has started a business before, did not completely see it through, as a CEO right now, my main focus and my main priority was understanding and learning how to do what I do well, correctly, efficiently, and effectively. And as a young African-American woman, nothing matters more than building wealth, creating generational wealth for my family, for my children, for my future, and funding my legacy. So this conference has been amazing, if for no other reason than the fact that we have access to amazing speakers and amazing community. And for people like me who are here because we want to learn, our testimonial is simple. We have access to the juice. And I appreciate that so much about the Wealth Builder movement, about this virtual summit, because just like Dana Cosby said yesterday, our social capital spins just like our financial capital. So stuff like this is amazing. We are learning everything. This conference is taking us through step-by-step bits and pieces of things that we can use to grow our wealth, to create streams of income, to create funding within our community, and eventually handle our business and build Black and brown wealth, which is why we're here. So this has been amazing. This has been absolutely phenomenal. I can tell you that I have completely learned how to access the information. We may not be able to do everything our own yet, but we have learned how to access the information, and I am so grateful. Thank you so much to the Wealth Builder movement, and I cannot wait to see what the rest of this night has in store.
I'm Stacy Wade, President and ECD of Nimbus. We're a marketing agency located in Louisville, Kentucky.
Hi, my name is Dr. Dawn Wade. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Nimbus. And when we were asked the question of what does it mean to build wealth together, we literally just look back in terms of how far we've come in the time that we've been together. Independently, we were both very successful, and we had a lot of goals for ourselves. And some of those goals were similar and some of them were different. But we decided that we need to be strategic about how we moved as a family, how we moved as a business. So we set goals and we knew the timeline that we wanted to achieve those goals. And although we haven't achieved all of them yet, we are still working progressively each day to meet them together.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning, we had to really understand, hey, listen, let's define what those goals are and make sure that we're on the same page. I think ultimately in the beginning, it's always very difficult to try to bring those goals and ideas together because you always want to, make sure that you're getting to the same place. And I think to be able to have that confluence to understand that, hey, listen, this is the goal. And then being able to synthesize the deals that are coming to the table to be able to say, hey, this is the right deal for us to be able to go in that direction to reach that goal.
And we also had to not be competitive with one another. Stacy's very intelligent. He's very aggressive with what he wants to do. So when he's taking lead on something, I have to be comfortable stepping back to allow him to lead. Similarly, when I'm taking the lead on something, he has to step back, watch my back, and help me get to the goal so that we can both be successful at the same time without feeling that one person has to lead and the next person has to always follow.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, you got to understand all money's not good money. I've made my fair share of mistakes when it comes to that and understanding and being able to fail fast. Especially when deals come to the table, to see it really quickly and say, hey, listen, this might not be the right deal for us, and to be able to fail fast and move into the next deal is extremely important.
And there's no I, it's we. It has to be a deal that's good for us as a family as well as a business. We have children to take care of, and we also have team members that depend on us to make good decisions. So as long as we look at it from that we perspective, we'll always be good, and we're comfortable with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Wealth Builder Movement. So we have talked about real estate investment. We've talked about getting money for your business. We have talked about so much great information. But one thing that we certainly want to discuss, and just because we know a lot of businesses are in this situation, we want to talk about the effects of COVID-19. We want to talk about some of the opportunities, but also some of the challenges of COVID-19, and just get some tips and advice on how we can shift forward in that setting. So I have here with me Mo Sloan from Easy Chow. So Mo, I am going to open the floor. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us about Easy Chow. What is Easy Chow and how did you come to form it?
Sure. My background is about 30 years of software development experience, and I was working in corporate America, didn't really like what I was doing, felt there was a glass ceiling, thought I was capable of doing more. So I formed Easy Chow based upon my experiences. I worked at Republic Bank, UPS, Humana, and Papa John's, and utilizing my food tech experience, restaurant tech experience at Papa John's, I developed Easy Chow. And what we do is we're a digital engagement platform for restaurants. We simply put, we help them pivot and become e-commerce businesses.
So tell me that again, because so you're telling me you're a digital platform for restaurants. Is that kind of like when I go to the airport and I can, some of the airports now, instead of even walking up and talking to somebody at the counter, I just literally type my order into a kiosk?
Mm-hmm. Well, so no, it's a little bit different than that. So what we do is we help restaurants own their own direct channel. So restaurants have lost some of their business due to third-party menu aggregators or marketplace or delivery companies such as Grubhub, Uber Eats, et cetera. And so what we help restaurants is capture that market back, is own that relationship with their customer directly and monetize their brand.
So essentially, if I'm a restaurant and I'm sitting at, if I'm Angelique Johnson, I'm sitting at home and I'm like, look, I really want some, food right now. I pull up Uber Eats and I place an order through Uber Eats, and that goes to my restaurant of choice, right, on Uber Eats. then I know they charge me a fee. Do they charge the restaurant a fee too?
Yes, ma'am. So they charge the restaurant a hefty fee, plus the restaurant doesn't get the data, plus the restaurant loses cash flow. So there's a lot of negatives associated for the restaurant other than they do get that order. But that order comes at a premium. And the one thing that they lose, which is maybe the most important non-tangible part of it, is control. So they lose control over the branding, they lose control of the messaging. If you're a customer, you have a problem, you can't even contact the restaurant directly. You have to go through that third party. So if you do contact them, they'll say, hey, you need to contact whoever you ordered through. So what we do is we give them the ability to control and own that back.
Wow. So in this era of COVID-19, I mean, it's just, just taken a, slashing to the restaurant business. So I can imagine, I mean, restaurants are already operating on small profit margins. Then you get COVID-19, so a lot of them get shut down. So you have heavy losses. Okay, well, if I'm using Uber Eats or using one of those apps and they take their cut on my profit, it seems like Easy Chow, you probably would have been in a good place, or was it still very challenging even in the market, given everything going on?
No, we were in a great place.
Okay.
We were well positioned to provide assistance to what we call merchant partners, and our business model is set up so that they really are partners. We're intrinsically tied to their success. So if they're successful, we're successful. So we were well positioned. COVID was helpful to us because our message even resonated even more so with merchants.
Wow. So I know that with every challenge, there's an opportunity. With every opportunity, though, you have to be prepared. So was there, which can sometimes cause another challenge. So how was that? I mean, sometimes you get, you're like, wow, this is my time, my season, I'm ready to go, put me up, coach. And then you realize, whoa, do I have everything in order to take care of these large contracts? I mean, did you have any of that going on?
Oh, absolutely. So the previous segment was talking about venture capital, et cetera. We had some investors, and we just happened to close the round the same day that a lot of governors were issuing shelter-at-home orders. So we weren't ready, we weren't prepared infrastructure-wise to handle all the volume we were picking up, but we did what we had to do, and we got through it. It was pretty exciting because we saw some of our numbers increase rapidly. It took us 2 years to process $1 million. During the middle of all this, we were processing $1 million in a week.
Wow. So, I mean, pretty much, a lot of people were saying that, hey, there's no investment dollars out here. You're not going to raise money for your business in this economy. We don't care what idea you have. I mean, I've been hearing stories about a lot of people doing some phenomenal raises during this time. Sounds like yours was maybe just ending, when all this kicked off. But, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, is it really kind of an extremely dry season? If you're a Black or brown business, is this like the worst possible time you could be seeking investment? Or are we hearing some good success stories out there?
Well, we were fortunate. We closed our round right before everything went to hell.
Yeah.
But it's still difficult. Is it more difficult? Possibly, because now people are going to be more conservative with who they bet on. But this is still a horse race.
Yeah.
So it's about being focused, knowing what you're capable of, and overcoming challenges.
Now, you started your business as a full-time employee. How many years were you a full-time employee as you're running this business?
I was a full-time employee up until we received our first angel investor.
How many years was that?
It was 4 years. Right. I started the business in 2015, and 2019 is when I quit full time.
Wow.
And it was. I was fortunate enough that I was in that position, but I was basically working 2 full-time jobs.
Wow. And can you just give our viewers a sense of how big was this business? I mean, we're not talking you were working full time and you were just like taking some orders through the local, mom and pop, cookie shop. Was there a significant business that was coming through the company while you're still working full time?
Yeah. I mean, we were doing pretty well. We got to the point where, we had an office. I had a couple of full-time employees. They were actually 1099s, but nonetheless, they were full-time workers, and we were doing well. But I couldn't take the next step until I quit. Whether it was right or wrong, that was a parachute, and I couldn't be successful unless I cut the cord, and flew.
Did that parachute have anything to do with, your life circumstances? Or, you're married, you have kids, or,
Yeah. Yeah, so it had a lot to do with my family and and making sure I don't put my family in a bad position, but it also had to do with the fact that I'm not really I'm not an entrepreneur by nature. I'm kind of somewhat conservative. It's just that when there's certain times in your life when you have an opportunity, and you have to either seize it or you watch it go past.
Yeah. I think that's interesting because a lot of people feel like you're just born an entrepreneur and, you just, you come out the womb and give me the money, right? But that's not always the case. And there's just different types of entrepreneurs. So you're an entrepreneur, but you're just maybe a different type than somebody else, right? I mean, to me, it's pretty entrepreneurial. Here you are working a full-time job and then, doing this big business as well. We don't have much time left, but I did want to talk about, how was that balancing the full-time job, the family, and the business, and did that prepare you in any way to be able to tackle the challenges of COVID-19?
I think so. I mean, my life experiences have prepared me for COVID-19. I don't think I could have pulled this off at being 25, and that's not to say a 25-year-old can't do that. That's not my point, but the life experiences I had and basically intestinal fortitude that I developed over the years because of things happening, experiences, prepared me for like COVID-19. Okay, it was a challenge. We knew if we took advantage of this challenge, we could be successful. So that's what we try to take is it's a gift from God, and just to do the best job we can do.
Wow. Now, and you do have investment that's coming in through angel investors. So how we just got off the panel talking about difficulties of Black and brown founders finding investment. How long was that journey for you to kind of close on that first round and then move forward?
Yeah, it was about a 9-month journey, and at times I'm not gonna lie, I was like, man, I don't know if this is gonna happen. But our lead investor is Ryan Bridgman and the Bridgman family, so they've been instrumental and helpful in helping us get there. In addition, their concept, Mark's Feed Store and Napa River Grill are customers of our application. So there's a lot of synergies there. Yeah, it took a while. Anybody who tells you that it happens like that, people say, oh, I get $50,000 on a napkin. That was not my experience.
That was it. Like they were like, show me the napkin, show me the receipt. Well, do you have any words of advice for businesses that are, trying to not just survive but to thrive during this pandemic? I mean, it's still going on. I know that with everything else going on, it kind of is being washed out in the news. But do you have any advice for businesses that are really trying to prosper during this period?
Yeah, I think being flexible and being efficient and being resourceful, and then that kind of goes along with being efficient, but looking at the opportunities there, instead of looking at things I try not to be a negative person. I try to always look at the positive side of things. So instead of looking at things from a negative perspective, look at things from a positive perspective. And you'll be surprised how just that extra boost of energy and confidence and everything can have an entirely different perspective and propel you to where you need to go.
Wow. So what's up next for Easy Chow?
Continue to grow our business. We want to get to, we believe we have the opportunity to get to over $1 million in annual recurring revenue this year, and then $4 or $5 million next year, and just growth. I mean, it would be awesome if we could get the company to, if we could be a tech company, minority-owned, female-owned, and we could get it to $1 billion unicorn status.
Wow. I mean, I believe it. I believe it's going to happen.
Well, I don't know about that, but I'm going to try.
You got my vote.
I'm going to do it or die trying. So.
Well, I'm so happy that you have joined us. I'm so happy, even happier, that you have been able to find prosperity in the midst of this pandemic. And that you have been able to really, kind of rise above it all, but also see the opportunity in what it is that is happening. And I think that's a skill set that, a lot of people don't have and don't take advantage of, those that do have it. So kudos to you, and thank you so much for joining us. We are going to be back with our final segment, and we're really going to talk about just wrapping it up with the broader scope and the context of Black and brown wealth, and what you guys can do at home to really shift the needle, help close the wealth gap, and build for your families and for your communities. We'll be right back with Nikki Jackson from the Federal Reserve. Please stay tuned in a moment.
Of marketing, branding, and photography. And also that guy from Common Conversations. When asked a question about wealth, I had to think about it for a minute and go back to when my grandmother and my mother came to this country. As an Afro-Latino, they came here with the idea that they would be able to build a legacy to hand down to their children and their grandchildren. And that afforded me the opportunity to start my first business when I was 11 years old. And I've been on that journey ever since. And so as you think about wealth and what wealth building is, it has different definitions. And throughout the paradigm of your life or your career, you might find that it changes, the definition changes, your goals change, your desire change. And mine has throughout that journey. When I first started out, I thought about wealth as being the most successful and tied that to having goobs and gobs of money. And then when I was younger, in my early 20s, that is what I sought out. That is what I ran for. And as time went on and I got married and then I had a child, and the companies that I worked for, whether they went out of business, were sold, but transitions happened, I found myself as an entrepreneur and a family, and a father, a husband. And the idea of wealth changed. Wealth for me became about being healthy, educating my daughter, and making sure that I'm building a legacy for her. When we started the business 13 years ago, we started the business 13 years ago with the idea that we would build a legacy for my daughter, something that she could have, something that we could hand down to her and that she could build and or give it away, sell it, and get into a whole nother business. On top of that, being able to develop and build our community, make it better, be able to hire people that look like us, whether it's through traditional employment or even subcontract work. But that was the whole purpose, and that has been the new definition of wealth building, at least for me specifically. If you talk to my wife, we have totally two different ideas sometimes, and that's a conversation, if you're married, that you're definitely going to want to have, because we're all going to grow both together and individually. And it's important to have goals. Definitely if you're married and if you're single. Having goals, being very strategic in how you achieve those goals, and being very consistent as you're thinking about building wealth in this life. I'm Miguel Hampton. I own F5 Enterprises, and this is the Wealth Builders Movement. Thank you.
Welcome back to the Wealth Builder Movement. We are in our final segment. I'm sad to not be able to talk to you guys anymore, but don't worry, we're going to keep this rolling. You will hear more from us. In this last segment, I'm here with Nikki Jackson from the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, Louisville branch. She's here with us. She's going to be dropping some wonderful knowledge about the state of Black and brown wealth, but also some wonderful opportunities for us to get involved on the broader context. So we've talked a lot about, individual wealth. We talked a lot about family wealth, even community wealth, but there is a much broader scope to that federally, and ways you can impact the community, not just locally, but also nationally. So we'll have that conversation now. Nikki, can you start by just introducing your background, who you are? I mean, here you are, fabulous, Black, brilliant at the Fed.
Well, I just want to say I'm so honored to be here, and I remember, Angelique, when this idea was just an idea. I remember when this was a concept, so I'm so glad to see it come to fruition and have the opportunity to be a part of this wonderfully important dialogue. So, as you said, I do work for the Federal Reserve. My role is to be the face of the Fed, to try to demystify the work of the Federal Reserve. Many don't know what the Fed does. We are the nation's central bank. We are accountable to you, to everyone who's watching this, in as much as we promulgate monetary policy. That means we set the federal funds rate, the interest rate under which all of us are impacted. So it's important that we be visible and that we be accessible and vulnerable in the communities that we serve. This is kind of new for us with the Federal Reserve. I'd say over the last 15 years or so, we've really decided to, in a strategic way, come from behind the veil and be a part of the fabric of decision making and really understand how our decision making on interest rates impact communities specifically. So my job is to carry the water of the Fed and serve as an ambassador of the Federal Reserve in the Louisville zone, which for us is central and western Kentucky and southern Indiana.
Wow.
So I talk a lot about economics and the economy.
She came with the facts. She's got receipts.
Well, I hope so.
Oh, man. Well, one thing that I love, Nikki, about you is just the fact that, when we think about the Federal Reserve, we think about, the larger economy. I think a lot of us have in our mind, there's maybe the staunch, white male, old figure, and we don't realize that, Black and brown people, we're in every level of it, right? I mean, here you are. So can you speak a little bit about how you're able to leverage your role to actually make impact in your own community?
Yeah, so, well, Angelique, I've been Black all my life, unapologetically so, very happy to serve in this skin and be useful as I traverse my whole career and talking about the lens through which I see the world, and that is certainly that from a Black female's perspective. And so I'm just happy that, I get a chance to work with an organization who expects me to bring that lens to the way that I work. And so what we're able to do with great community leaders here in this zone, you chief among them, is talk specifically about the plight of Black and brown people as it relates to the economy. For so long, there's a reason why you thought about kind of perhaps older, white, affluent, influential males as dominating the conversations around policymaking, both in monetary policy and fiscal policy for that matter. And that's because they have. That's the tapestry that we come from. And so I appreciate that from the employer standpoint, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis recognizes the need to embrace different hues, and from those hues, different perspectives and viewpoints that come to help us to understand the economy more richly and more robustly. But then I also understand and love, as a policymaker, we're willing to challenge ourselves and think very differently about macroeconomics and the role that race and racism plays in the furtherance of it.
Wow. You know what I love about you, Nikki, and it's something we talked about yesterday about social capital, how you never hesitate to share contact. And, I don't hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but, you have these wonderful house parties, at your house. And it's all about raising funds for smaller organizations that are doing good in the community. So to me, it's like you're able to maintain not only your identity, but also as a Black woman, but also your identity as an activist in the community. So do you have, any advice for people that feel like if they go the corporate sector, if they go the federal sector, if they go, they're doing, local government, that they have to kind of lose their soul in the process?
Yeah, so the funny thing is, it's, this new awakening, I think, that we have now over the last month in this country about the realities and the ills and the insidious nature of racism, I think we'd be kidding ourselves if we were to say that we can be as Black as we want to be and still pay our bills.
Oh, yeah.
Even now. But one thing I will say is that, so much of what we have learned to do and to contort ourselves into being as Black people is muted. So we have to mute a part of ourselves in order to be impactful professionally and personally, like the personal and the professional could never reconcile, at least in any potent way. And so what I've tried to do is rebuke that possibility or that reality maybe for a lot of us. And I think, my greatest currency is the fact that I'm nice. It has very little to do with my education and my academic credentialing and perhaps even my professional credentialing, but I'm a very nice person in general, and I think that that has boded well for me for my entire career, and it makes me more than palatable with white folks and black folks and all kinds of folks. I think that that's helped me build real strong relationships across a multitude of audiences, so that I hope that I speak with credibility and authenticity, but I'm also very genuinely and excitedly Black.
Listen, you're like, I am who I am. You can take it or leave it, but you probably won't take it. You know you want more of it.
You want some of this Black girl magic. Come on.
Listen, you're going to get us in trouble on this live
I know. Okay, let's go.
Okay, well, let's get to the facts. Let's get to, can you tell us about, like, where are we at right now? Because we know that, even pre-COVID-19, we were already, let's talk, since slavery, we've been in trouble, right? And even in the brown community, immigrant community, we have these huge disparities. But can you give us maybe a snapshot of just kind of where we're at, in the economy?
Yeah, and I'm probably going to rely on some of my notes here because I want to be really pointed as I talk to your audience about this. But let me just say this. One of the things that pains me and brings me great consternation is our country's economic footing, our economic and national security footing, in my humble view, is very much dependent on how we are able to reckon with, from a policy standpoint, what this country has done to oppress the very brethren who are set to become the majority of the population in 2040. So what does it mean in 2040, where the majority of this population is Black and brown and have had very little experience with, have no understanding how to navigate through, and no real opportunities to plug in to the American dream? Like, that's a national security issue and an economic issue, and not just a social justice one. So when I look at the state of affairs in terms of Black wealth and Black income inequality, it's pretty abysmal. It's pretty abysmal. And, since around 1968, when the Fair Housing Law was passed, ostensibly hoping to help folks like you and I, and maybe the folks that are listening to this broadcast, Black and brown folks, really be relieved from the burdens of discrimination in housing and so many other areas, all those areas like around redlining that have really rendered our communities beleaguered. That was in 1968 that those laws were passed. And as we sit here in 2020, we are actually worse off as a culture from an income and wealth inequality standpoint. So I have some statistics I wanted to share.
Yes,
so in 1968, a typical middle-class Black household had $6,000 in wealth compared with $70,000 for typical middle-class white households. Wow. So 2016, the typical middle-class Black household has $13,000. In contrast to white household has $149,000. So that's an even larger gap from a percentage standpoint.
Yeah.
So I think while most of us know, we understand, Black folks ain't doing that great. There's all kinds of reasons systemically and institutionally why that's the case. So we know that, like, academically. I don't think that we realize that not great really means we've not progressed at all in 70 years.
Oh, yeah.
And that in many ways we're worse off than we were from a percentage standpoint than we were in the during the height of the civil rights movement.
Yeah, and I think to that effect, I know it was Dr. Pamela Jolly, she had put it, just laid out so clear that, we have actually lost wealth. So we thought, okay, we've got more access, we got, better educated, all this stuff, but there was wealth that was in my grandparents' generation that got lost in the mix. And so now in my generation, we're actually less, right? We have less wealth, accumulated wealth. And so we're losing that. Is part of that, in addition to being structural, is any part of that cultural? Do you buy into that narrative?
So I guess I buy into that narrative to a point, but not without starting first with the structural and the institutional pieces of that. So, yeah. There's a piece of this that I think some people could argue, okay, the bootstraps argument may work, but that's like 25 steps down the line, right? So we got to deal with the fact that Black and brown people were not people. Yes. Black people let me say specifically, were just not regarded legally as people for the majority of this country's years. And I'm including post-slavery. In some ways, I'm even including up until a month ago. Let's be honest. So I think that there's we have to recognize that so much of our structures and so much of our institutions have embedded in them processes and protocols that render our wealth building initiatives and our wealth building desires and even income equality hapless. So I mean, there's a part of the cultural stuff we need to probably save a little bit more, maybe, okay. But I'm not even getting to that argument until we deal with the realities around the structure and the institutions.
And I think there's this concept that reparations is very far out there. It has no context. It would be the first time in the history of humankind that such thing would happen. I mean, has reparations happened for other communities? Is that kind of a new thing for Black people?
Reparations just happened for the stimulus on some level. I mean, we just did it for COVID. So there is a mechanism. Right, so the issue is not the funding, the issue is the ideology. So here's a question that I often ask, often meaning probably every day over the last month, and that is, are Black people an integral part of America's future, yes or no? Like, when you close your eyes and you think about the future of this country, do you see Black folk running around in that picture in your mind in any meaningful way? And if so, then that means we have to recognize the realities that our growth and development have to be accelerated. The gap has to be closed in an accelerated way. So, which is why I firmly argue for reparations, economic reparations. And I think that we could, if we can get past the philosophical diatribe about, what did we really deserve it? Is this just a handout? If we can get past that kind of diatribe and really start talking about, well, how do we structure what these reparations might look like? We can really make some. I think we can really make some headwinds. But I just don't know. You can't program your way out of this. This isn't like a programmatic fix. We need to fix these poor Black folk, and we need to hand out more charity and try to remedy what's wrong with them. So I think we got to really change the conversation around how our collective betterment can be risen from the ashes that were created by racism and its venomous sting. I've always said the remedy perhaps to years of unequal treatment is years of unequal treatment.
Listen, let's tip the scales the other way, just a little bit, Can we do that? So we talked about, just everything. We all know the story, right? And you have presented some facts on it. Is there anything that we can do to champion our cause, be it for reparations or other legislative changes? Like, what can we do?
I got notes on that too.
All right.
I have 6 things really quickly. Okay, number 1, invest in Black-led and Black-serving nonprofits in our community. So that's one thing. So a lot of these organizations, these nonprofits, are doing amazing work, but they're always having to go hat in hand to some other organization, usually majority, asking for funding and asking for decision making on how to release that funding. Buy Black. I mean, I don't. It's not. It's as simple as that. Buy from Black people more often than we have in the past. That's not to say to the exclusion of majority-owned businesses, but we have got to include in our cadre of businesses that we support Black businesses. Create and support strong Black-led philanthropic structures. So did you know in Kentucky, I think this is right, we have no Black foundations, Black-led foundations, like none. There's 2 coming, one out of Metro United Way that's called Black Love, led by the wonderful Daryl Unseld, who's fantastic in this space, and another called Getty that Tawana Bain is starting. But I don't know of any other. So what that means is anytime that we're looking at building Black community in a better way financially, we always have to go to white organizations, ask for the money, ask for the, have their assessment of our efficacy with those programs being like the only evaluation.
And then there's always adding in the extra, well, why can't we add in, because they want to make it a little white, can we add in white women? And there's nothing against white women, but some things are not are specifically for our community.
Right, well, we never, in the captains of our own destiny. The 4th is argue for economic reparations. So we got to get started just getting our mouths positioned to say that without apology and without feeling like we got to backtrack from the conversations. Like, you know, at dinner parties or we were talking with our neighbors, so what do you think about reparations? And then, you know, let the conversation ensue, but don't take off running and stay away from those conversations because we have to use those words. Vote for candidates who expressly support Black wealth initiatives and anti-racism. Hard stop. And lastly, in our companies, we have to argue for the maturation of diversity programs. So I think we've done a great job of kind of planting the seeds, all these gardens that are growing. We have some tulips and daisies. We've got all these wonderful plants that are part of this tapestry, but we don't know that this one needs this kind of nurturing and this one needs this kind of soil and this one needs this kind of sunlight. We don't pay attention to what the needs are of each of these kind of species in our garden. And that's the next iteration, I think, of diversity programs from a corporate standpoint. We've got to start compartmentalizing. Black people's needs at work, in work and through work are very different than Hispanic or Asian. And so we've got to push our companies to get to that point.
Oh, that's powerful. Woo. All right. Well, I don't just want to end right there. We're going to wrap it up. I am so grateful that everybody has joined us. I am so grateful to Nikki Jackson from the Federal Reserve, Bank of St. Louis, for partnering with us on this, for making all of this possible. Again, if you want to partner with us in the future, please do check out the link in the chat. And, you know, as Nikki so put it, we don't feel like there's nothing you can do, be it in your individual financial situation, your community's financial situation, or even on the federal level. There is always something that you can do, an active role that you can take. And if you don't take an active role, then nobody else is going to step up and do it for us. So we already have the wisdom, the knowledge, the brilliance. We just need to go after that power and really demand it, as Nikki put it. And so thank you so much for joining us, and stay tuned for more in the future. But this concludes our virtual summit on Black and Brown Wealth.
The Wealth Builder movement isn't about money, it's about peace of mind, hope for the future, and fulfilling your God-given purpose. You are a wealth builder. You're looking to launch a new business, invest in your community, make systemic change, and actionable plans. You are a wealth builder, but you can't do it alone. Join Wealth Builder Movement, an online collective advancing Black and Brown wealth together. By joining our Facebook group and YouTube channel, you will learn from, invest with, and leverage others. Wealth is a group activity. Work, create, and build with others. Join the movement, the Wealth Builder Movement.